Hey guys! Part 5 of What If Naruto Became the Hokage before the 5 Kage Summit. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 13 Malice. The crackle of lightning screeched forth around the humid parts of the area, as dust clouds had burst forth from the rock that was split from Sasuke's Chidori Aisu. Kabuto cackled madly as he slithered around, letting off that improbable smile as his hands glowed with chakra. Sasuke's indifferent facade, however, seemed to remain the same, only the Uchiha raised his right eyebrow. He evaded that fast. Kabuto instantly closed the distance between him and Sasuke, still wearing that menacing grin. With a flick of his right hand, chakra began to concentrate on his palm as Kabuto gave a reverse chop to Sasuke's torso. Sasuke leaned back and watched in complete detail as the chakra scalpel that Kabuto used on him missed. Sasuke then switched the grip of his sword to a reverse grip with the tip of the blade dropping down on Kabuto's head. Sasuke then dropped the blade to impale the man's cranium, when Kabuto reacted by twisting his body to the side, and encircled the youngest Uchiha like a coiling snake, binding his arms and legs. Kabuto's maniacal grin didn't drop one bit, as his hands now both glowed with the chakra scalpel. Kabuto then swung his arms from the side to the middle to form a cross chop on Sasuke's neck, targeting his carotid arteries and jugular veins. Sasuke instantly grew into a panic and struggled as his eyes widened when Kabuto's palms that glowed with chakra phased through Sasuke's neck. The struggling immediately halted, and in silence, the three watched as this man tore through Sasuke's blood vessels like paper. Sasuke didn't cough, no, instead, a trickle of blood was all that escaped from his mouth as the grip from his Kusanagi was loosened, the tip of the sword impaling the ground. "I didn't know you were this easy to kill, Sasuke-kun," Kabuto cackled, as he continued. "What are you talking about?" Kabuto's golden slit eyes widened as he turned his head to his right, finding the Uchiha unharmed with Kusanagi in his left hand diagonally pointing to the ground, with the tip dripping in blood. Blood gushed forth from the medic nin's elongated torso, spraying the life-giving fluid all around. "You placed me in a genjutsu. I never noticed you whip it out as well," Kabuto shouted with that grin turning into grimace as he fell down. "The moment you stared into my eyes, I already placed you in a genjutsu as a precautionary measure. It looked like I was right in you showing your hostility towards me," Sasuke mentioned as his right hand crackled with electricity. The sound of 1,000 birds chirping echoed throughout the area, crackling with uncontrollable sparks. With a monotonous voice, Sasuke impassively retracted his right hand and drove the technique straight to Kabuto's chest. Chidori. Chirping of 1,000 birds. Kabuto howled in pain. The feeling of electrocution surging throughout his body dominated his senses, as he felt numb from the pain that Sasuke inflicted. Sasuke's hand protruded from the middle of Kabuto's chest, as the man looked on in shock. Sasuke extracted his arm coated with the man's blood, and deactivated his Sharingan. As he began to walk away, not even taking a third step, Sasuke heard a chuckle coming from the assumed corpse. Sasuke turned around and saw that Kabuto's chest now littered with hundreds of white snakes as it began to reform, closing the hole completely and mending it. "Don't you remember the power of the white snake, Sasuke-kun, along with my ability as well?" Kabuto slowly got up. His chest now fully repaired, the torn cloth showed proof of the perfectly new skin. "This regenerative power, along with my ability to infuse every cell in my body with chakra, has given me a regeneration rate that is on par with Tsunade-sama's ability to regenerate lost cells." Kabuto looked at Sasuke with that grin present again. As he raised his right arm, giving an ephemeral glow, the forearm of the medic was now covered in scales. "Though, the longer I use chakra, the more potent Orochimaru-sama's cells become. Just standing here while doing the regeneration technique with my chakra is driving me to the brink of insanity." Kabuto's cheeks now began to chafe, as it started to break down, showing another set of scales. "Though with this technique and this wondrous power, I can never die in battle," Kabuto shouted as his body then disintegrated and changed into groups of snakes. Sasuke was quick to react, and jumped towards the tallest rock to survey the area around him and give him a higher ground and limiting Kabuto's movement around. It was then that 4 gigantic snakes had erupted from the ground, opening its maw trying to swallow Sasuke whole. Kiri. 5 boats, only 5 out of the 20 convoy boats, sent out by Lightning Country have made it out from the ambush that had occurred 3 days ago at the northern part of Water's Country's seas. Of the 20 boats, there had been 15 messengers assigned to deliver their messages to Water Country, and the rest of the remaining allies of Fire Country. Now, only 3 managed to get out of the conflict alive. Seeing the somber faces of the 3 Cloud Shinobi, Samui, Dari and Omoi, those that managed to survive the horrendous ordeal, Ao couldn't help but feel pity on them. It had been more than a decade since the last and bloody war had occurred, though Kumo and Kiri had nowhere near as much skirmishes as did Earth, Wind, and Fire. Being a war veteran himself, he could only imagine the horrors inflicted on the battlefield. The sight of men slashing each other's throats, the smell of burning flesh, the screams of pain and anguish, it was all too horrifying. Get them to the infirmary first, these 3 need medical attention. It looks like chakra exhaustion based from the symptoms. Tell the Mizukage that the messengers will be delayed. The 2 escorts that Ao had saluted before heading towards the Mizukage's office. Ao could only stare at the clear blue sky. It was as if it was mocking all of humanity below. After checking of what little supplies Kumo had sent over for aid, Ao gave a deep sigh and turned back to the Mizukage's office. No doubt she wouldn't be feeling all too happy as to what is happening. The question was, what the hell is the real Supreme Commander doing at a time like this? He wondered, now that 2 of the 7 swordsmen of the Mist Swords are missing, will Kiri still have its morale up by the time they commence this seemingly long campaign? He had hoped so, for if they were to fail, Ao couldn't even fathom the consequences of a madman's folly. Earth Country. It was hell on Earth, the sudden appearance of the Yambi no Saru, 4-tailed monkey, over one village of the former wood country as screams of anguish and death littered the black-stained sky, as smoke rose from the flames that the tailed beast spewed from its mouth. Blood spilled everywhere, as people began to cry in despair and panic. The patrolling ninja unit from IWA was forced to take action and try to evacuate the civilians along with stalling the bijou before any more casualties would be the result. As the rampage of the 4-tailed beast continued, one IWA shinobi looked on in horror. He had heard of Rishi's burden back then, as he did Han's. He was terrified, to say the least, that the man that he had known to be powerful had the call and beckon of this monster that rampaged throughout the village. The fear that was elicited from just being around the man was not much compared to this one. At least, Akazuchi had given Rishi the respect that he had deserved. He had served IWA well, he gave his life to it, drove him to do the most challenging of jobs, chose to ignore the fears and the constant shunning to him. He lived in his missions, he breathed in them. Yet, with all that skill, with all that talent, with all that success, Rishi felt he never succeeded and one day, just simply retired and vanished without a trace. His sad isolation and ultimately loneliness never disappeared. It shadowed him wherever he went, he never minded it, he never did a damn thing about it, and it was tragic. Seeing the monster that now stood before him, Akazuchi couldn't help but see the inner rage and sadness that Rishi never displayed. He felt his eyes water for a moment, as drops of tears fell down watching the horror that unfolded in front of his very eyes. Even in death, Rishi's soul still didn't get the peace that it deserved. The monstrous beast ravaged the earth and burned houses, livelihood, men, women, and infants. It all seemed too cruel, too barbaric, and too inhuman. The very fact that Akatsuki had mentioned that they now control the bijou made him realize just how evil humans can become. With a shaking voice that almost didn't come out, he muttered, "My God! Was this the thing that Rishi-senpai kept in him all along?" Akazuchi trembled as he told the civilians to run away as fast as possible. The static in his ears brought him out of his overwhelming fear as he heard the voice of his squad mates. "Akazuchi Taishu, we've cleared our station. We're going to the rendezvous point at the northern sector. Please finish your holy shit, it's coming your way, Taicho. Double time your evacuation efforts and get out of there, now." Akazuchi looked to his side as the 4-tailed beast wailed upon him. The giant, with his immense strength, had managed to catch a smashing fist aimed towards him. He parried the blow with both his arms away but was met with a punch when he was distracted. Akazuchi was sent flying from his position, crashing through a house and through a grove of trees hundreds meters away before crashing into the ground. Akazuchi Taishu. Akazuchi Taishu. Come in. Please respond. It was the last thing that he had heard before fading into the realms of unconsciousness. Sasuke vs. Kabuto. Chidori Nagashi, chirping of 1,000 birds current. Lightning crackled from every which way of Sasuke's body, effectively sending the 4 humongous snakes in a fit of muscular spasms and fell down on the ground. Kabuto suddenly appeared under the rock that Sasuke stood on, hands glowing with blue with chakra as he was about to swipe Sasuke by the ankle. Sasuke barely dodged as he flexed his lower extremities and used a somersault backwards. As he was about to clasp his hands together for a seal and use a fire jutsu, his right hand suddenly grew numb. With a surprise, Sasuke clasped it with his left hand and grimaced in pain. As he landed on the ground rough on his back, he rolled on the ground away from Kabuto as he slowly got back up. So the poison has finally kicked in, huh? Kabuto asked as he gave a vicious grin before cackling. When you hit me straight on with that Chidori of yours, it had allowed me to exert some of the poison caused by the white snake to fester on your skin, mixed with my blood. I've created an anesthetic effect on your arm through droplet-to-skin contact. Kabuto raised his hands to his sides slowly as a set of shuriken were held in the interlacing of his fingers. Though still not as potent as Orochimaru-sama's, I've created a desired effect that is surely to affect you if I manage to touch you with my blood on your chest. Kabuto walked towards Sasuke in a slow manner before unfurling it straight at the Uchiha. Sasuke, with his left arm holding his kusanagi, he deflected the shuriken thrown at him as a few went by, whizzed by too close from his neck. Now you can't use any close-range jutsu. In fact, you can't use jutsu period. This makes your struggle all the more satisfying. Kabuto leaned forward, dangling his tongue with a smile. His hands once again glowed in blue chakra. Kabuto instantly grew faster as the skins in his arms were slowly flaking away, with scales slowly replacing a human skin. Kabuto's grin grew further as he began to laugh and extended his left arm and was about to thrust his palm at Sasuke's chest. The Uchiha, surprised by the sudden increase in Kabuto's movements, swerved to his left, hitting the side of his chest. Sasuke coughed up blood as he felt the muscles near his diaphragm were severed. He began to breathe heavily and grew dizzy before kicking Kabuto straight at the chest, sending the insane man flying back from the blow. Kabuto had hit his back on a tree and went through it before crashing on the ground as dust clouds erupted. You're mistaken, Kabuto. I have one jutsu that could effectively kill you, without worrying about getting close to you and finishing you off. Sasuke then heaved, cradling his left side to where Kabuto had hit. The pain was intense as it was dull. He felt his muscles spasm as his Sharingan shifted to the gift of his Manjikyu Sharingan. Amaterasu. Illuminating heaven, black flames ignited around the dust cloud as it began to consume everything in Sasuke's vision. Fire raged forth, burning anything it stood on. He suddenly heard the screams of Kabuto from the smoke, as the fire consumed every fiber of his being. His horrific anguish was heard all throughout the forest, as the flames began spreading around. As Sasuke stood up, his legs shaking from the pain that was delivered to his chest, his forced breathing made him stumble slightly before kneeling. Did you think you've won? Sasuke's eyes suddenly grew in surprise as he saw Kabuto. Half of his shirt was burned while his right arm rested on Sasuke's back, Kabuto leaning on the side. That special kawarimi that Orochimaru-sama created. I knew it as well. I wasn't his right-hand man for nothing, Sasuke-kun. Sasuke growled at Kabuto before swinging his left hand back at the medic Nin. Kabuto merely caught it with his free arm and said to Sasuke with a wicked smile, baring his teeth that were slowly turning to fangs. Nay, Sasuke-kun. I just want you to know that I've got a new poison I've been dying to try. Won't you give the pleasure of being my first subject? Up towards Sasuke's teammates, Suigetsu immediately grabbed the repaired Kubikiri Hocho from his back as Jugo prepared his partial transformation. This is bad. Jugo, Suigetsu mentioned, as they both jumped down towards Sasuke, but not before being blocked by hordes of shinobi that dug themselves upwards from the ground. Kabuto merely raised and wagged his index finger slowly from the arm that was using Sasuke as a bar table and said, I can't let you two bother me with this experiment of mine. Kabuto then bared his fangs and dug it deep into Sasuke's arm. Kabuto inwardly laughed as he let the poison dripping from his blood towards the Uchiha boy, who grunted in pain. With that done, Kabuto smirked and kicked Sasuke by the back, sending the boy tumbling away from him. That little poison just now, I created it specifically for you, Sasuke-kun. It's basically a poison that activates your cells to multiply rapidly, radically altering the mitotic reproduction of them. You know, in other words, Sasuke-kun? Kabuto this time laughed heartily. A tumor will grow on one part of your body, to where and when, I don't know. But it will slowly eat away your life as time passes by. You should just... Shut up, Kabuto. Sasuke interrupted as he gritted his teeth, his Manjikyu Sharingan flaring to life once again, and his Amaterasu had hit Kabuto's face full force. Kabuto let out an anguished cry as the black flames began to eat him whole. He struggled, as he frantically ran around like a headless chicken, cursing and shouting in agony. His horrified scream intensified as he fell into the ground, tossing and turning. And with a prolonged cry, suddenly fell silent. Sasuke slowly got up, feeling sure that this time, he had killed that insane man. Only to find out that Kabuto had suddenly burst from the black flames as his whole body was singed with the flames and kept regenerating even as the black fire continued to consume him. Ha 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 ha! Kabuto cackled madly, diving right to Sasuke and delivering a powerful clothesline arm straight to Sasuke's face. The Uchiha, too weak to dodge, felt the sudden force of the attack and fell down to the hard ground, shattering the rock underneath him. Ha 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 ha! Kabuto cackled on, mumbling incoherent words as he dashed towards Sasuke, this time, shouting only one word, die! 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 Sasuke had finally seen Kabuto snap from his last grip of reality. Sasuke merely forced himself to stand. There was only one more Manjikyu technique he can do before finally passing out of exhaustion. As he forced himself to stand and ignoring the pain, Sasuke took a deep but excruciating breath, and his Manjikyu Sharingan flared to life once more. Susanoo! It was then that a red glow appeared from beneath Sasuke, as bone structure began to form, showing the upper half of the body at 20 feet above. Muscle then began to surround the bone structure, as skin and clothing surrounded it. Its cloak and helmet then covered Susanoo in a Tengu-like armor. Its right hand then separated, spouting forth a new one, as the shield from its left hand expanded. Kabuto got up, still an unbalanced grin on his face as he dashed towards Sasuke in breakneck speed. Sasuke looked around, and saw the flames of Amaterasu on the side when he first used it on Kabuto. Sasuke's eye twitched as Kabuto then jumped, nearing his proximity. Susanoo let out its war cry, used its shield to deflect Kabuto away to his left. Like fluid lightning, Susanoo's shield expanded in a V-shaped manner, and a small, almost invisible string connected the inverted V's two vectors. With its chakra blade fully formed, the giant quickly placed it on top of the shield-turned crossbow and aimed it at Kabuto. Kabuto landed on the ground, as the chakra of his former lord was now encompassing him completely. His consciousness now gone, he was turned into a person that had no conscious thought, and the insanity of this new person shook inside Kabuto's mind as it ran straight towards the Susanoo, with its projectile now aimed at him. No longer recognizing rationality, and no longer able to process a coherent thought, Kabuto kept dashing straight towards Sasuke. Twang! The arrow had flown from its original point and smashed right into Kabuto's abdomen, tearing him and sending him along with the arrow towards the sea of black flames that danced into the humid summer sky. This person screamed in pain, in agony, as he was now stuck from the arrow with the flames continuing to burn him, eating away at his flesh as he cursed and shouted and slowly tried to reach his hand out, before finally being dissolved and turned to ash from the everlasting flames of Amaterasu. The corpses of the undead ninjas crumpled down as its wielder was effectively killed. Jugo, Suigetsu and Karen rushed over to Sasuke, who was panting and fell down on the ground. Sasuke! Was all that the Uchiha heard. Before being consumed by darkness, he looked on before he lost consciousness. He saw Karen rolling out her sleeve and Jugo forcefully making him bite Karen's arm. Kirigakure. The Mizukage had patiently waited for the medics to patch up the three exhausted shinobi from Kumo. The mere sight of their disheveled and exhausted selves made the Mizukage postpone the meeting. It also brought a very terrifying idea that the Federation now has a terrifying naval force if the islands of different nations that supported it were anything to go by. Still, Konoha was showing no sign of action except for an intensified border patrol. That aggression of Kusugakure to Takigakure was a blatant sign of an impending invasion force, yet the Hokage has refused to act in retaliation. Even though the Hokage had not since acted, Tsurumi grew impatient. She would not take this act so lightly. The Hokage might be idealistic, a fool in his position, young, passionate, handsome, and downright gentle to boot, but she was far more experienced in the line of politics. She would not let it be the reason for the fall of this alliance. Mei sighed before finally being met with one of hospital staff and now allowed her to visit the three messengers from Kumo. Once she got inside, she sat on the lone chair, hands on her thighs, and sat gracefully. The three shinobi inside tensed, and yet remained quiet as they all tried to sit, but Mei raised her hand and told them to not push themselves. I've heard all of your encounters from Ao. I'm very sorry that you had to experience such horrifying events unfold. But I trust that all your hard work was meant for nothing. Oma looked down, remembering the night of that slaughter. The battle for the Western Sea was an utter disaster for their forces. He could still remember all those men that were either shot to death by an arrow, burned alive, or even drowned in the cold waters. It was his first time participating in war, and he couldn't help but feel sympathy now to all those war veterans that kept their grudges until their deaths. Karui, however, gripped the sheet of her blanket, mortification setting in, as she felt that she was absolutely useless in the conflict that occurred. She couldn't help Omo and Samui as she was knocked unconscious by a blast impact. Samui, although shaken from the event that occurred, willed herself to speak in her usual monotone and business-oriented voice. Reikage-sama, Killer E, second in command of the alliance, has proposed that the 5 Kages establish a central command in Iron Country. He says that coordinating the forces would be easier. He proposes that a minimum of at least 200 soldiers be sent there to serve as the main force of the alliance. From there, the 5 Kages are to spread their forces to different lands of the Federation along with a wide manhunt for members of Akatsuki. Only 200 of my soldiers? It won't even be enough to at least dent an aggressive village like Kusa, who has gained a considerable amount of territory and resources from its neighboring country. The Mizukage replied, it made sense that moving an amassed and large army from one country to another would be too impractical. They needed to move fast. And in a country that is an archipelago like theirs, it would be even more obvious, deploying ships for troop transportation and all. Yes, the Reikage believes it is enough when your forces meet up with Konoha's. He believes that from there, the Supreme Commander would take command. How you shall reach Iron Country shall be decided by the Supreme Commander himself, since he shall obtain the main bulk of the forces. Samui replied. The Mizukage looked thoughtful for a moment before considering their choices. Now it was all clear, since Fire Country and Water Country were literal neighbors, it would work. With that, Mei nodded and got up from her seat. She turned her back from the 3 Kumonin and said, Good job, all 3 of you. You deserve your rest. Thank you for giving me this kind of information. As requested, the army of Kiri shall be sailing east. And with that, she had slowly closed the wooden door from their room. As she walked towards her office and readying messengers to be sent to Konoha, Mei couldn't help but feel anxious. Konoha, 2 days later. Naruto now stood on top of the Hokage Tower, where he gave his speech to the people. Now, he was giving of another speech, this time to his soldiers. Soldiers that Tsunade had prepared and managed for half a year, warriors who are ready to fight for the cause of the leaf. Each of them stood erect as they faced their youngest leader yet. Naruto looked around and nodded. It was then that he began his speech. It's been 6 months, and we all know the signs of war have finally hit full circle this time. Looking around, he walked sideways as his soldiers stood perfect. Tiger looks all present. Akatsuki has managed to anchor itself well onto the minds of the people who weren't supposed to be involved in our fight. It's hard for me to put a tough act here in front of you, as this war is going against everything that I've stood for, against everything that I've ever fought for. But in front of the Alliance, I was taught that even leaders have to make the most crucial of decisions that involve you all. It was then that Izumo and Kotetsu had arrived with a large folded paper. Naruto had used a single Kage bunshin and with it, grabbed the paper from the pair and unfurled it in front of his men, his loyal soldiers. The paper revealed the contents inside, a map of the entire continent, with a large X mark on the landmass that's situated between Lightning Country and Earth Country. In a 5 days' worth of time, Water Country shall prepare and march their forces through Fire Country along with us, and will charge through River Country, effectively freeing Wind Country from the embargo. From there, we'll go straight north to Iron Country, and from there, establish a central command. The Hokage, who formally represents as the head of the Alliance publicly, has proposed that Iron Country be considered our base of operations. That's why I'm prepared to take only 200 of our forces, as will the Mizukage. No doubt we'll probably face resistance when we reach River Country, and this is mostly a very dangerous campaign. Tsunade has done well in making sure all of you stand prepared in my absence, and I'm sorry for leaving on such short notice. But I needed to make sure that we at least stand a chance against the Federation and Akatsuki. You've all heard it by now. Akatsuki has 7 of the bijou. To which, some of the men twitched slightly. Among them were survivors of the Kyuubi's rampage 16 years ago, and although it was already past a decade, their memories could never forget the utter terror brought on by the bijou. Naruto then raised his hand, rising to the level of his face, gesturing for his men to let him finish. That's why I'm going with this mission, to make sure that we can prevent a bijou kill all our comrades and allies. I'm asking you now, are you prepared to fight for our cause? If you think you have the guts to take on such a dangerous operation, step forward. If you think not, then it's fine as well. I'm not forcing you, as I know some of you have families to take care of, wives, husbands, sons and daughters. You can protect our home. I'll only be taking 200 men. So step forward if you want to go with me. The gentle breeze of the wind blew forth atop the Hokage tower, ruffling the clothes of everyone atop. Silence befell on the outside. The mere tension was nerve-wracking, as their leader stood on top of the tower, his feet on the rails with his arms crossed, looking down below with a scowl on his face, as even he is preparing for the worst. A few seconds passed by, and no sign of movement coming from any of the Leaf Shinobi. Tsunade, who was standing behind Naruto, was about to shout to their men about how weak-minded and spineless they were, until she saw someone highly unlikely to step forward. Down below, Shikamaru looked up at the blonde Hokage standing on the rail, his hands in his pockets with a relaxed expression as he said, "I'm here to protect the king, but I can't do anything if I just stand around and watch our enemies do what they like. I'm volunteering, if for a sole fact that I don't want to drag this troublesome war to a longer time. If something can be done, then we just have to do it." Naruto nodded, as Izumo began registering Shikamaru's name on the notepad he had brought earlier. It was then that the next set of people stood on front, Kakashi and Yamato. Kakashi said as his eyes stayed glued to his favorite book, with Yamato scratching his head. Kakashi said as he flipped a page like Shikamaru said, "If something can be done, then we just have to do it. No point on just being on the defensive. And by dragging this war longer, we are playing right into Madara's hands. I won't let the legacy of the 4th Hokage and the very ideal of this village vanish like that." Yamato nodded. "I'm probably a necessary member due to my abilities. I'm limited to what I can do, but I'm sure it will be enough." It was then that guy literally jumped from his position and stood on front. I, Mato Guy the beautiful green beast, refuse to let the cool and hip Kakashi to be on this mission without me. I refuse to be left behind. Yash! Then I shall endeavor as well, my sensei. I shall join you on your most perilous journey yet," Lee had shouted, as he too jumped from his position. "Ka! Lee, your youthful spirit never ceases to burn brightly. Come! Let us now run 500 laps around Konoha to celebrate our most youthful fire." The master and student then began dashing away from the assembly, with Tenten following them from behind, shouting in an aggravated tone, "Hey, wait! The Hokage isn't finished yet." Kiba and Akamaru then stepped forward as well, chuckling with the rest as they saw the antics of the master and student look alike. I can't let Shikamaru be the only one acting cool in our age group. Count me in, Hokage-sama. Soon, one by one, they began to step forward, taking a leap of faith, placing their lives on the village that they want to protect. Kotetsu and Izumo were now trying to keep up as the names of the men volunteering for this mission were now starting to pile up. Wait, please. We need all of you form a single file. First come, first serve. However, it only got worse. There were, however, several shinobi that were left standing behind. Naruto looked at them from above, as he stood on the rail with his arms crossed and spoke in a stern but concise manner. Are you all sure about your decisions? This may be the last time that you would ever see your home again. Are you all certain? It was a silent but a solid affirmative on their own. They knew it was a possibility. The chances were big. The Federation had since been deploying ninjas left and right, and with River Country just a neighboring country by the east of Fire Country, and some minor countries below, it could surely turn out to something horrible. Once it was done, he raised his hand slightly and Kotetsu instantly kneeling by his side as the blonde continued to watch the people sprawling below, he said to the Chunin, Kotetsu, I want you to get me Aburaim Shino. I have an important mission for him. With that, Kotetsu bowed and left via Shunshin. For the next 5 days, Naruto had supervised and watched his village like a hawk. He looked around and saw the volunteers for this campaign pack all of their belongings. He even visited some of them. He walked into their houses and spoke to their families. Not once did he ever leave his hat off. One particular meeting that remained in his mind was that he had met with one child still studying in the academy. Hokage-sama. A mere child came toward him, with his shinobi father not far behind. Naruto saw the child and looked at him in admiration. Naruto couldn't help but give a small smile. Wow! You're even cooler when you're so up close, said the boy. Naruto grinned. That in turn made the child grin as well. The father, a bit stiff that the leader of their village was at his house, apologized to the Hokage, Naruto merely waving it off as if it wasn't a problem. Naruto then kneeled in front of the child and looked at the boy in the eye. And what's your name, kid? Sir, Hideaki, sir. The child replied in a voice that resembled a soldier's, complete with a mock salute. Naruto chuckled and then ruffled the kid's head. Hold on there, little tiger, you still aren't a ninja to be calling me sir like that. Wait until you're a genin, said the blonde, and the boy asked. Are you really going to war? The child asked. Naruto stopped for a moment as he remained shocked for a second, his eyes widening a little, but then returned with a melancholic smile. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to. Because I have to be there for people like your dad. I have to fight. It's because we have to keep you kids safe from those men. And because I want to prevent another tragedy of the past. The child looked on in mere curiosity, looking above Naruto's head. The blonde looked up as well. He forgot he was wearing his hat. The blonde slowly removed the headwear, and noticed that the boy looked to where his hat was. Smirking, Naruto placed the Hokage's hat on the boy's head. The child looked above his head and supported it with his hands, adjusting it until he saw the face of the 6th Hokage. Looks good on you, Hideaki. Naruto saluted. Hideaki beamed with pride. Just you wait, Hokage-sama. One day I'll become just like you. Naruto smiled even further and ruffled the child's hair yet again. I'd rather that you don't, kid. If you want to be a good man, then you're just going to have to find a path that suits you. With that, Naruto stood up and grabbed the hat from the boy, who returned it with a little disappointment. Naruto turned to the father and said to Patriarch, he's a good kid. Makes me wish that I shouldn't have taken this job in the first place. Hokage-sama? Asked the Patriarch. Naruto merely shook his head. It's like what old man Sandaime was feeling. I wish I didn't have to do this. Looking up, Naruto saw a shooting star streak across the cold night sky. Then again, it's merely wishful thinking on my part. I can't back down now. Everyone's counting on me. Naruto then began to walk and wave at the father and son. Make sure to say your goodbyes. It's going to be one long mission. The Patriarch merely nodded. Once Naruto made it to his office, he began his last night of paperwork before heading out. There were stacks of them, his clones had already managed to take care of some, while the others were now sorting and packing his gear into his scrolls. The blonde saw that the office he had looked more like a functional room in a bank, chaotic, impossible to follow, and messy. The blonde sighed as he sat down in his seat behind the desk. He leaned back a little as the clone with the notepad began reminding of the remaining paperwork to be done. Hours passed by, and as soon as he was finished, he saw that he was done 10 minutes till midnight. Looking around, he saw that his office was the only place that had a light on left from the repaired sections of Konoha. The blonde yawned, having dispelled his clones 2 hours prior when he was a few papers away. As he got out of his seat, he stretched and placed his hat down on the desk, the symbol of fire facing him. "No need to wear this if I'm on the battlefield, it's better if I leave it here," Naruto mumbled. With that, Naruto left the hat on the Hokage's desk. The light shining on the symbol of fire gradually fades as he slowly closed the door. Naruto, before he went home to rest and await the arrival of Kiri's armies, walked towards the top of the office. As the cold night breeze swept in Konoha that evening, Naruto looked up at the faces of the former Hokages that was sculpted on the mountain. 6 months into office and his face still wasn't placed there. He wasn't surprised. The people had put the repairs of the village first rather than their monuments. In a sense, it relieved him. He sure as hell didn't want his face be plastered on the mountain with a frown like his predecessors did. Maybe a Hokage flashing a toothy grin on that dreary-looking monument would be better. It was his trademark after all. He chuckled and placed his hands in his pockets. Somehow that would look great, if not awesome. It was different from the norm after all, and he was anything but normal. Naruto then looked over at his village. The walls of Konoha seemed a little higher right now, simply because of the attack made by Pain. Konoha was a huge crater, and the repairs would likely take years before it could look as normal as it should be again. Add to that burden was this war. It really brought a sad expression to the blonde for a moment. Before finally deciding to jump down, Naruto reminded himself that even if he was gone, Konoha could still continue. It was the people after all that made Konoha and not the Hokage. As he made his way home, Naruto looked back at the office of the Hokage one more time, before finally turning his back and going home. "Naruto-kun?" Naruto turned back, and saw the face of the Hyuga heiress, a look of concern written all over her face, as Naruto looked surprised to see Hinata still awake at this time. He remembered that she was not registered with the force about to march to River Country. The elders deemed it so. She was the heiress after all, as now, she was forced to stay in Konoha, while most of the branch members registered along with a few main house members to show that the main house were no cowards. Naruto scoffed at that. Pompous bunch of old men, he supposed, but they did have their points. "Shouldn't you be resting, Hinata? You've got a lot of stuff to do tomorrow," Naruto reminded her. Hinata shook her head. "I couldn't sleep," said the shy girl, as she looked on the ground, retaining the habit of twiddling her fingers. "Oh, so that's why. Mind telling me why?" asked Naruto. Hinata then clenched her hands into fists and steeled her resolve. She looked at the blonde in the eye and said, "I've had a bad feeling for a while now. I thought a night out would do me good." Naruto merely smiled. "Well, I've still got some time enough to kill. Why don't we talk about it? There's a 24-hour shop that I know that sells some decent food." Hinata, not one to turn down a time to spend with her desire of affection, quickly gave a nod. Naruto merely smiled. Once they bought their food at the said store, both Naruto and Hinata sat at a nearby park bench. As Hinata opened her sandwich and slowly nibbled, Naruto was looking at his cup ramen as the steam entered in his nostrils. Out of nowhere, Naruto was the first to speak. "The last time I was here, I was a crying wreck when I found out that the pervert died." Hinata quickly noticed that it was Jiraiya that Naruto was talking about as the blonde leaned on forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Seeing what he did, I kind of felt angry at Ero-sennin like that, running up to his own doom that he knew as well as Bachan did. Naruto continued, shaking the cup ramen a little. "But now I kind of see why he did it. There was something he could do, and that he didn't miss the opportunity to do it," Naruto said as he now opened the plastic cup, revealing the hot noodles inside. "He knew he was going to die, but he still did it. It was something that he wanted to do, simply because he wanted to protect me. Naruto had suddenly felt his ramen wasn't the best thing to have now. Now I feel like I'm doing the same. I want to protect everyone, simply because I want to. Naruto smiled as he looked at Hinata. Hinata couldn't hide her melancholic smile. She simply said to Naruto, a few droplets falling from her eyes, her sandwich easily forgotten. It felt like she was never going to see Naruto again. Please promise me, Naruto-kun, that you'll live. That you'll come back here, to Konoha, to us. We don't want another leader give off a heroic death anymore, we just want him alive when he returns. Hinata picked herself up and touched Naruto by the shoulders. Please promise me. It's enough that you have to lose everything for everyone, don't lose your life as well. Don't talk about like you are going to die for us, it hurts. It hurts so much just you saying it. Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and dropped the ramen cup in his hand and looked down. He was speechless this time. Please keep your word that you'll live, don't break your promise. She shouted at him, with all the voice she could muster. As Hinata continued to cry, Naruto only gave a small smile, a sincere one. And with words that seemed to have eased him, he said to Hinata with the biggest smile he could muster at that time. Thank you, Hinata. I promise, and I won't ever break it. It's my promise of a lifetime to you, he said. And with that, Naruto walked Hinata back to the manor of her home, as Naruto prepared for his trip in the coming few hours. The blonde arrived in his apartment, and changed to his nightwear, sleeping on his bed before leaving for later in the morning. 6 in the morning. Naruto had to slap his face to keep himself awake. He was sleepy still, but the tension that was mounting as he and his forces were waiting by the southern gate of Konoha for the Kirin soldiers and the Mizukage herself. As the doors slowly opened, Naruto saw the Mizukage and her troops now walking in a fair distance. He motioned for his soldiers to march on towards the group from the Mizukage side and lead them on. Once they were close enough, the Hokage formally greeted her troops and said, I'm relieved that you made it here in one piece, Mizukage Dano. He said in a formal smile. The Mizukage smiled and bowed properly. Likewise, Hokage Dano. I'm sure that your village can offer us the necessary supplies before we part? Naruto nodded, and raised his arm, motioning for the supply caravans to give to the Kirin who had been traveling for 3 days towards Konoha. Naruto then continued, the trek would be 3 days from now, from here to the eastern border, through there, we'll be marching on the northeastern side and strike from there, where we'll be meeting with the forces from Wind as we push up. We'll have to make a detour at Iwa first though. Amigakure still has not sworn allegiance to any side, but will most likely stay neutral until the outcome of this initial assault. Hasn't Amigakure sworn allegiance to the alliance already? May asked. Naruto shook his head. It's simply because AIM is stuck between 2 opposing sides on each direction. If we can pull off a victory at River Country, they would likely join us. Naruto informed the Lady Kage and she nodded. Very well, then let's us march northeast, Hokage Dano. It is time to show the rest of the world that we are not to be trifled with. The Mizukage informed. Naruto merely nodded, but as he turned away, he was hoping that this wouldn't turn into a bloodbath. Consider talking with their leader first, he hoped it would work. But just before he was about to set out, the words of his former master echoed into his ears. Power drives a man insane, Naruto. They sink people into madness. If you think leaders are so pure-hearted, then look no further on to your first C-rank mission in the form of Gato. Greed breeds to more greed, eventually, consuming even their soul. You'll understand when you meet a daimyo one day, brat. You'll see just how inconsolable monsters humans can become. Chapter 14, Hubris. The darkness of the night brought forth the silence, and seemingly cold and anxious feelings of every man that were guarding the northeastern outpost of River Country. It was pitch black all over, with nothing but their lamps and the stars across the sky serving as their light. Faintly, they could hear the sounds of crickets chirping a few meters away from their posts. So much was the ominous blanket of silence, that the men positioned on the eastern front of the outposts were gripping kunais and swords every waking moment. With but a gentle caress of the midnight breeze, the torches and lamps in each outpost were momentarily snuffed out. It was then that death reared its ugly head. Jumping out of the canopy of leaves, scores of shinobi took the momentary darkness as an opportunity to take down this outpost before any of them have the right mind to react accordingly, weaving throughout the silent chaos of what was occurring, slitting necks and performing bloodless killing maneuvers left and right. Ninjas began swarming throughout the makeshift outpost like scavengers on a carcass, effectively cutting off the eyes and ears of one of the border stations of river country. Kiba, who had been part of the night raid, could faintly hear the muffled screams of agony coming from inside the compound. The stench of spilled blood littered his nose as he looked absolutely perturbed for a moment. He looked to his left and saw Yamato standing calmly with a hand on his elbow, dictating the small squadron and effectively and methodically destroying the structure of the compound. Yamato had assigned him to let him know if any person should escape the outpost. Outposts are the eyes and ears of any defending nation. They tell the signs of an impending invasion, take them out, and even a minor force can conquer a country. Yamato recalled on what Shikamura had said. The boy really was good at strategic meetings. No wonder he was so valuable to Konoha shinobi. It was then that Kiba's nose caught wind of a person, managing to run from the slaughterhouse so to speak. Kiba suddenly shifted his gaze to Yamato with a frown and the Jounin nodded. All right, Kiba, you take point. You'll be taking a team of 5 shinobi with you. I don't care who they are, as long as you intercept any escaping shinobi from this vicinity. Your limit distance is 3 kilometers. Move out. Yamato commanded, still focused on the carnage that was currently taking place. Somehow, it felt absolutely normal for him, here, standing on a thick tree branch while the assault took place. Yamato mused. Perhaps he was too used to the ANBU this much that the mere idea of doing these dirty jobs were nothing more but a daily occurrence during the days in the Black Ops. Kiba had already taken 5 of his men. Most likely, they were already beginning to do clean-up duties, or what the ANBU usually call them. To his right, Yamato looked just in time to see Kakashi jump down, standing perfectly straight and saying to his Kohai, with this, the 5 main fortresses here in river country should be easy enough to take down. Yamato could only nod, as the screams of bloody murder soon began to dissipate inside. As Kakashi began to speak, I can't believe just how an obscure figure of legends past was able to gain the trust of the minor countries so easily. It would seem like Madara had a card dealt under his sleeve when he tried to negotiate on the summit in exchange for the remaining tailed beasts. Yamato mentioned as Kakashi shook his head. No, it was more like a hasty decision on the part of the minor countries. That and they feared the power from the alliance. I wouldn't blame them though. Throughout the history of shinobi, the ones that suffered the most during war were the minor countries. Most of the fighting was done on grounds not of the 5 great nations. The result was countless minor countries either dissolved or were absorbed into other countries. Then what do you think, senpai? Who is in the wrong on this war? Yamato asked, and Kakashi merely shook his head as he answered. It's tough to say. Yes, the minor countries were fooled so easily like that, but they had a reason to fear the alliance. What if someone in the near future uses the power of the alliance in order to absorb more minor countries and take away their liberties that they had back then? It's just one of the questions that go through the heads of each village's leader and each country's daimyo. No matter how you see it, the alliance is a force to be reckoned with. Yes, we were forced to create this alliance, but we had our reasons as well. We want to put a stop to Akatsuki, who now has 7 of the 9 bijou. If it continues, virtually all life itself will be subjugated under Madara's will. We aren't really the ones to strike on the offensive here, since this federation was the one that started the campaign to their side, but it seems we've been playing in right into his hands, even if we now know his work throughout the past 10 years or so. To this, Yamato turned his head towards the Jounin, a look of utter disbelief as Kakashi continued, You've realized it, haven't you, Yamato? The alliance is moving at a sluggish pace. Because the leader is young, he's still trying to grasp on what is happening all around. Naruto is Hokage. Yes, he's the head of the alliance, yes. But to thrust the responsibility where he still can't get a grasp of is utterly impossible even for him. Instead, he focused the task on himself, to improve to a point where he can become a figure worth looking up to, a pillar of strength. That way, he can instead intimidate other countries to stand down and make it a point to listen to him, and to give us battlefield morale when he finally enters the war zone. I don't get it, senpai. What does Naruto's position and performance as a leader have anything to do with Madara's plans? Yamato asked. Kakashi, meanwhile, put a hand on his chin and crouched down, looking at the shinobi below who were scouring the area around the now silent outpost, cleaning up the piled corpses of friend and foe alike. I'm saying that Madara, who now has a firm grip on the Federation, is silently pulling the strings using one form of event to another from his side. He can tell what the Federation should do, and will counteract in order to stop them. And as the battle continues to drag, will more than likely fall to his hands. His pushing his plans in a pace that the Alliance complies fast, and with these turn of events, it could very well lead to Madara winning. Yamato had stopped for a second. The pang of fear crept up its way to his spine, sending a tingling sensation as thoughts of the ancient Uchiha patriarch lingered inside his head. With hesitation in his voice, the younger ANBU captain asked his senpai, "Then, is this war a hopeless effort to begin with?" Kakashi replied, "Perhaps it is, perhaps it isn't. But with an elusive and cunning man like Madara, anything is possible." It was then that Yamato had realized just what Madara was capable of. He had stepped into the shadows and used Akatsuki as a means in collecting the bijou, manipulated every country to go into his favor. How much trivial would it be for Madara to use this war as his means to an end? "Should we tell them about this, senpai?" Yamato asked, looking concerned. Kakashi, however, shook his head. By now, most of the Kages may have realized this. That's why the remaining 4 are only awaiting the Supreme Commander's movements. If Naruto was the first to act, then the rest follow. It's his pivotal role. However, his inexperience and a part of his reluctance prevented him from doing that, something one of the remaining Kages would frown at, especially the Tsuchikage. The Mizukage could possibly overlook this as nothing more than a mistake on Naruto's part due to his new leadership role, but it won't be the same with Inoki or Killer A, who have expressed their doubts earlier on. Kakashi commented, as he then looked up to the night sky. The light of the stars shone clearly for the night, as he saw the rising smoke coming from the cremated bodies of the dead. If it were in another situation entirely, Kakashi and Yamato would be worried, panicked even, as the sign of smoke meant a siege and could possibly alert the remaining outposts in the country, but since most of the outposts had been taken care of earlier, the only thing left to do was to act fast before those fortresses begin to notice their movements. Kakashi couldn't help but feel the pang of anxiety slowly inching on his spine. He could feel that there was something about to happen, and at worst it could probably lead to something horrible. He could only wish for his ancestors to guide them, for it was now a war for every human alive. River Country, Northern Village. Gray clouds blanketed the skies above. It was starting to rain once more, as the 2 former elderly advisors of Konoha were now on the run. Mitokado Hamura had felt that the survival of the last Uchiha, Sasuke, would one day come back and haunt them. That one day, the results of their past decisions would descend upon them like a judge delivering a sentence. Hamura was a firm believer in karmic retribution, and as an advisor to the former Hokages, Hiruzen and Tsunade, he knew that crucial decisions not left to be judged would be the result of their downfall. The massacre was horrible, yes, but it was the only thing left to do to stop a guerrilla and ultimately prevent a war. The Uchiha clan were a clan of proud men, and proud men do not learn their place through leniency and diplomacy. It was a truth that was hard to deny, a fact that they can't escape since it is the nature of men. The whole factor with the Uchiha was a mess. Everything started going downhill the night of the Kyuubi's assault. The Senju had lost the art in controlling the bijou, and the Uchiha deemed such a technique forbidden art, never to reach out into the light of day again. But then, why did the Kyuubi specifically attack Konoha? Was it to prove that they no longer had a means in controlling the beasts? No, Hamura thought of all the possibilities, from simple ones that the force of nature had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, to more conspired and convoluted ones such as that the Kyuubi was obtained by the other villages and a Jinchuriki was created to be sent as a suicide mission to Konoha. But one thing was bothering him that day: the list of deceased Uchiha members in the reports handed out to him and Koharu. Quite simply, there were none. Hamura began frowning at this. He had asked Koharu before when he confronted her about it. Was it mere coincidence? No, it had to be something much bigger, something that the Uchiha were bitter about. When it seemed that the elders had solved this mystery, they approached this to the Sandaime, who had been rattled at this sudden development. The Sandaime had asked for time. Time to investigate the matter further on, something that would give the Uchiha an alibi to ground such suspicions. The matter didn't escape Danzo's ears, who had then suggested that ANBU patrols and monitors be conducted to the Uchiha clan, and that they be separated from the main villagers through a construction ruse. The Uchiha hadn't heard of this. They felt insulted that they had to be the ones being moved out of their homes into a new one. But for the man within the shadows, a simple outside monitoring wasn't good enough. Danzo needed a mole inside the complex to check for anything, even a hint of a coup. It was then that he discovered the young prodigy, Uchiha Itachi, who had by then lost his teammates and Jounin instructor in the last war. Itachi was a Chunin back then, well on his way to rise within the ranks of the ANBU. He had his spies monitor the prodigious child the day he had received his promotion, and spared no stone unturned on Itachi's behavior. Needless to say, Itachi, who had by then began to earnestly believe in the philosophy of the will of fire, was the perfect tool to monitor the Uchiha clan from the inside. It was only a few years later that their fear became realized. A manifestation of their worst nightmare, the Uchiha clan thought that they had enough of being isolated from the politics of Konoha and wanted a part of the power that the Senju clan then possessed, being the other half of the founding members of Konoha. And luckily enough, Itachi, who was by then a member of the elite ANBU squad, was chosen as the mole against Konoha's top brass, a move that delighted the leader of Root. Through a series of deception after deception, the Uchiha never noticed that the Sandaime had already known it was about to happen. And the rest, as they say, is history. Hamura adjusted his glasses. As he stood up and refilled his water bottle at a nearby stream, the old man leaned down and kneeled by the side of a pristine but clear creek, when he saw the streak of red flowing along with the water's path. A tremendous amount of dread escaped from his very being, as he looked to the side, and saw the corpse of a beheaded Koharu whose blood was flowing from the neck, her body lying limp on the side of the small stream. On alert, Hamura stood up, prepared to take on the person that took out Koharu. It wasn't the time to mourn for the dead. He knew that much, but he couldn't help but feel the sadness escaping him as he thought of himself as the last member of Sarutobi Hiruzen's generation of Team 7. Hamura grabbed a kunai from his sleeve as he heard rustles in the bushes, careful of taking out any foe. As Hamura stood, a sudden tug stopped him from continuing on any further. Slowly looking down, he saw a spear made of lightning, piercing through his chest from the back, the tip giving off a spark as the said chirped loudly like 1,000 birds. Blood escaped from the lips of the now dying man, as he turned around slowly, seeing the face of Uchiha Sasuke, whose eyes now flaring to life and turning into a Manjikyu Sharingan. Hamura coughed as Sasuke unceremoniously extracted the lightning blade from his chest, and Hamura crumpled in a bloody heap, looking up into the gray clouds and a Sasuke who was smiling wickedly at him. Burn in the depths of hell, you bastard, along with that old woman. Before he could close his eyes one final time, he could see the sky crackle and lightning as if the heavens themselves judged upon him the sins that he had obtained. But before he could do so, he looked at the apparent last Uchiha, who seemed paler than he remembered. He struggled to get his right hand up and put it on the blade, gripping it firmly as his fingers bled. With but a pull of the blade, Hamura struck it closer, knowing his end was nigh. With a smile, he said to the young man gone astray, "This is what you wanted, right? I know of what I did was wrong, but sometimes you need to tear your heart to achieve the greater good. Don't speak of such things to me when you forced my brother to kill my family." Sasuke screamed at Hamura, faces mere inches apart, as blood dripped from the young Uchiha's lips. "I don't ask for your forgiveness, Uchiha Sasuke. But please, don't go after my village. They are ignorant of that event." Uchiha Sasuke merely said with an arrogant smirk, "Forgive? You think that I am letting you ask for forgiveness? What do you think of me? I am not a god to let out such a pushover attitude about what happened. I am not Buddha that seeks the path of enlightenment. I seek only the honor being returned to the members of my clan that you have mercilessly killed." Sasuke retracted the blade from Hamura's chest and turned around, as the man fell forward in a bloody heap. Sasuke looked back at Hamura, his apathetic features returning. "If it means that I have to kill every villager to get what I want, then so be it. Be it Naruto or Madara." Sharingan contorting to the shape of the Manjikyu, Sasuke stared at Hamura with utter contempt. I will kill all of you. With that, Sasuke walked away. Hamura suddenly grew pale. This was a monster crafted by their hands, a demon sculpted from years of isolation, tragedy and good intentions gone awry. Was the curse of the Uchiha encompassing them all now? Hamura slowly closed his eyes, a flash of lush green trees invading his darkening vision. He could see every tree standing tall except for a stump that stood before him. To the side lay a fallen tree, slowly wilting away, and in his hand was an axe. Look at the forest and not the tree, Hamura thought, who turned his back and saw countless stumps that had fallen trees all around. But eventually, even cutting down trees would lead to another, and soon enough, even this forest will become a wasteland. Hamura could only bow his head and closed his eyes. The old man let go of his axe and began his trek. Alone was the man that walked in the deafening silence of death's vision. Idealism is mere wishful thinking. But realism alone will never get you far either. Hamura looked up at the blinding light above, that not even a clear blue sky was visible, shielding his eyes from the light. Hamura turned his head back down and saw small acorn seeds near his foot. It's too late to plant trees anymore. There is nothing left for me to do but. Hamura kneeled down and began digging. Just one tree. Even that will be enough. Sasuke dragged Kusunagi's blade on the ground, slowly walking his way towards his followers as his vision had gone hazy. He had initially recovered due to Karin's healing ability earlier. Taking out the two elders were a simple matter enough. The problem was the poison wasn't gone. He had been suffering from an insurmountable amount of dull pain throughout his body, as the poison was slowly eating away at every cell he had. Karin, Suigetsu and Jugo ran towards the slumping Uchiha, who now fell to the ground from the excruciating amount of pain. As droplets of rain began to pour from the darkening skies, Sasuke looked up and gritted his teeth from the pain. I won't die. I'm not done yet. Not without killing Danzo first. Sasuke slowly opened his mouth. Every bit of muscular movement was unbearably painful, like countless needles being pricked in every part of his body, slowly inching its way through his skin. As his head was cradled from Jugo's arms, Sasuke could feel his jaw being clenched down before forcibly biting Karin's arm once again. It had been like this for the past several days, with Sasuke now having to resort to Karin's healing abilities once a day. The damage that the poison was giving out was repaired temporarily before the poison could strike back hard with a vengeance. Since then, Sasuke and his group could only walk for a few hours a day before resting and letting Sasuke recover his breath, looking paler and paler as the days go by. Just as the chakra was about to transfer to Sasuke, a small, spherical object began to contort from a small space in midair, as ripples became visible spinning around the dark circle before finally spitting out a familiar, orange-masked man that now stood before him. The hem of the black Akatsuki cloak danced as the small gust of wind vanished. Sasuke looked up on the masked face of Uchiha Madara. The Sharingan eye, frowning above him as lightning crackled from the heavens and rain started pouring. Hello Sasuke, has the pain from Kabuto's poison increased since last time you were bitten? How many days has it been, 3? 4? Madara inquired, as the masked man pondered and walked closer to the Uchiha. Sasuke looked startled at this revelation. There was no way Madara could have gained that kind of information suddenly. Unless, of course, the man had been tracking him through one of Madara's subordinates. It was highly probable. Sasuke opened his mouth, his voice coarse and unintelligible. The Uchiha said in the midst of his pain, trying to sit upright and willing his voice go out of his mouth. Zetsu. Madara's Sharingan eye twitched slightly and said, Of course, you underestimate the power of my information network. Zetsu may not be the best fighter in my organization, but nonetheless he is vital in espionage missions. Suigetsu had immediately drawn Kubikiri Hocho from his back and pointed it at Madara while threatening the ghost-like man. What are you doing here, Madara? We've done our part, now leave us or we'll deal with you. Jugo was about to get into his stance before the masked man walked calmly at Suigetsu. The blade pierced his chest but no blood had spurt, as the sword phased through him like he was nothing but air. Madara chuckled inwardly as he said to the apprentice of Miss Demon, Best know your superior, boy. Suigetsu, startled at this, swung his Kubikiri Hocho to the side as effectively phasing the blade through Madara's chest before spinning and hoisting the unwieldy blade upwards. Madara simply stood there as the blade cleaved him in half, hitting the earth below and shattering it completely. Now, Suigetsu, I didn't come here to fight. If I did, I'd have prepared the materials I need to take all of you out. Besides, I'm reserving my energy for something later. I do, however, have a deal with you. Suigetsu frowned at this as he said, the last time we struck a deal with you, it labeled us as international criminals. I won't buy any more of your crap. Madara raised his right hand, as if signaling Suigetsu to stop before saying, but it isn't for you I'm making a deal with, Suigetsu. I'm making a deal with Sasuke. Suigetsu stood confused at this and looked at the heaving Uchiha, as the said leader of Taka coughed out blood before standing up. What if I told you that your poison can be cured? Sasuke looked intrigued at this, and took all of his attention to Madara. What are you implying? The younger Uchiha asked, not trusting the man one bit. There's a chance for you to recover from that poison in your veins. What Kabuto did was a poison not listed in Orochimaru's books, a new one. Although he was a poison expert, he pales in comparison to Tsunade when it comes to medicine and poison. Madara continued, as he now walked to Sasuke and faced him eye to eye. Are you suggesting I go to Konoha and demand Tsunade to detoxify the poison within me? Sasuke asked. Madara shook his head at the mere thought of sending Sasuke to Konoha. It was like sending a lamb to a slaughter, in his opinion. Good lord, no, Sasuke. You'd probably be stabbed by someone like Hatake Kakashi before making even a single step into their border in the condition you're in. Madara answered, as Sasuke continued his questioning. Then what's the purpose of bringing up Tsunade? The younger Uchiha questioned, trailing of a list of names associated with the slug mistress until he had recalled one name. His eyes narrowed dangerously at Madara before asking, You want me to confront Sakura? But she's in Konoha. That's where you're wrong, Sasuke. Madara continued, as the masked man then said, Sakura is in AIM, a former base that Akatsuki had when Pain was still alive. Why is she there? She's trying to convince a former member, now ruler of AIM, to side with the 5 nations in this war as it serves as one of the most important routes between IWA, Suna and Konoha. Madara mentioned. Sasuke considered his remaining options. Kabuto's poison was acting faster than expected, it was painful and the said poison was fast making progress around his body. There was still no information on Danzo, and it might take months before they could ever gain one. The poison would most obviously have completed its work in a matter of days. Sasuke dropped his guard for a second as Madara said to him, What would you have me do? Madara smiled beneath his mask as the space around him began to fold in a spiral, slowly sucking in Hawk before finally saying to Sasuke, Kill the former associate, and retrieve her ring for me. Remember, Sasuke, I did you a favor, the least you could do is fulfill mine, and I will know how you would do. I have Zetsu after all. If you can't fulfill your end of the bargain, I promise you that I will kill all of you. With that, Taka was sucked in the small vacuum of contorted space as all of them vanished from the clearing. River Country, 3 days into the campaign, 2 a.m. The daimyo was restless, his country was on the verge of collapse. The mere fact that Konoha and Kiri set their sights on them was utterly terrible. Those blasted alliance forces had silently treaded into his territory like snakes in a meadow, eating away at the hapless soldiers he had like harmless rabbits. As if that weren't enough, the associate that guaranteed help would come was nowhere to be seen. He was surrounded with incompetent fools. The daimyo paced around his room, yelling and cursing at his men as he did so. I think this is no time to be lashing out at your subordinates, Your Highness, replied the voice that seemed muffled and covered. The source of the voice then slowly popped up from the ground, as a green, jagged object that seemed to look like leaves began to open, its maw-like appearance, and a creature, no a man in contrasting black and white colors became visible in his eyes. Zetsu's yellow eyes stared at the plump daimyo standing in front of him. That almost undignified gait, those beady and distrustful eyes, and that dark but maintained scowl, it all made Zetsu inwardly smile. Pompous elite that seemed to be incompetent himself, judging from his management issues of his own army. He must be a new daimyo judging by the looks of it, meddling in the affairs of the military when he didn't even know which place to what maneuver. Where is Madara? Where is that imbecile that had promised to aid us in this war? Isn't it good that he had showed his demonstration of one insignificant village? Yet he can't even show up at the most crucial of time. No wonder you lost all of your members. You are all fools to believe in a misshapen man like him, replied the daimyo. Zetsu frowned at this. I suggest withholding that tongue of yours, daimyo-sama. Unless you want me to consume you from head to toe, then I suggest that you keep quiet, continued the other half. The pompous leader turned his head at this and said, You? What can a single buffoon like you do to a daimyo such as me? Don't you understand your place, filthy urchin? You are a mere insect compared to us. You should be careful with those words, daimyo-sama. They will be your utter undoing. Zetsu was about to step forward when he felt the chakra presence of his leader suddenly appear to his side. The spiral contortion of time and space grew larger, as a single man had appeared from the dark space. The man had a spiral orange mask that had its right side open. His Sharingan had becoming visible from the mask as he walked calmly towards the daimyo. He spoke in a much-mannered voice as possible. Stand down, Zetsu. Leaders will be leaders no matter how you look at it, the masked man informed. Zetsu seemed to relent at this but then stood back down instead. What would he gain from killing this pompous asshole? Probably a full stomach, but somehow, he thought it would bring some sort of cramps to his belly if he did that. Finally, you're here. Where is your promise? My country is suffering because of those power-mongering fools from Fire and Water, and you are dawdling around like the useless organization it was supposed to be. They have just taken over 3 of my most heavily armed fortresses up north and are making tracks towards my capital. Madara simply shrugged off the insult and said in a matter-of-fact tone, I was simply doing some business earlier that needed to be taken care of. The daimyo held up his nose in indignation and said, I don't care. I want those blasted shinobi out of my country as soon as possible. Sacrifice some of my men if need be. I want them out. Madara seemed to scowl underneath his mask. Dealing with this pompous feudal lord was a pain. Not only he had to bear the man's tongue lashing, he had to control his killing intent as well. No matter, soon enough he wouldn't have to hear from this incompetent lout ever again. Madara's visible Sharingan constricted, as the 3 comas on the red iris slowly began spinning. I have a suggestion to make, daimyo-sama. Madara cut in. The daimyo didn't even want to let him speak. Don't interrupt when I am talking, simpleton. Madara's visible eye twitched. As he continued, I have the perfect strategy to counter the force sent by the Alliance. It will bolster our allies and surely deliver a victory towards the Federation. To this, the plump leader raised his eyebrow and asked, And what do you have in mind, Madara? Do not worry, daimyo-sama. Rest assured, by the time the forces of the Alliance are visible near the walls of this city, they are as good as defeated, for they have no means of controlling our most powerful arsenal, only a means to seal them away. And even then, the rituals for such a task would be monumental even for the one-tailed beast. With that, Madara turned his back on the outraged leader, his Sharingan eye twitching to a scowl as Zetsu followed him suit. Once they were out of hearing range of the said leader, Zetsu began to speak to the leader. Do you really want to go down with what you said, Tobi? I thought you'd be more reluctant about it. Madara shook his head as both of them exited the premises of the feudal lord. On the contrary, Zetsu, I said I would bring victory to the Federation. I'll bring it. I just didn't say River Country would be the one to push them back. Zetsu eyed Madara carefully and then smirked. You're going to burn this village to the ground, aren't you? That is harsh, Zetsu. Madara commented before continuing. I am merely playing down on my interest, and my interest lies with the minor countries bringing down the stabilizers of power, and cause enough chaos to let them view me as their savior, their god. With that in mind, River Country will be the lamb that will serve as the sacrifice to my altar, to bolster the hatred of the Federation, full force. The glow of the full moon illuminated behind Madara as the man jumped to the tallest building, balancing himself with one foot as he stared on to the open fields outside of the city, glaring intently on the coming of the opposing army. Outside, the dead of the night did not favor them this time. The light of the full moon was in full effect. Its silvery glow seemed to prevent them in doing this deed. As the walls of the capital came into full view, so did a large plume of smoke erupting from the center. Then a faint but humming sound resonated all around the area. As bug-like wings appeared from the blanket of smog, flapping at an incredible rate, it opened its maw and drooled on the ground below it, letting of a river of saliva that began to dissolve anything that it falls on. The giant blue bag let out a sick but deathly screech as it began collecting chakra just above its mouth. The chakra was dark and malignant, as small orbs of dark energy began swirling at the small but unstable orb. As it completed its task, the telltale signs of destruction came forth from two of the armies of the 5 greatest nations. Naruto, realizing that what this tailed beast was about to do, shouted in fear of his men's lives. "Spread around, that's a devastating attack he's about to do. Don't try to get in its sights." As the order for them to scatter came to pass, every ninja began to scramble all around the view of the beast, trying earnestly to hide from its wrathful ball of death. The said beast stretched its wings back further as its upper body moved lean forward, its horn aiming to the outer wall of the capital. In quick succession of events, the malicious ball of chakra shrank to a minuscule amount for a beast and gave a mighty roar. Boom! The blast of the energy ball sent shockwaves all around the beast and its projectile. The force of the mighty wind destroyed much of anything that stood in its path, tearing houses, buildings, walls into debris and the castle of the daimyo crumbling into dust as it fell to the ground in shambles. It charged straight to the mountain that the Alliance's armies had been scurrying off from. In the final few moments of some of the ninjas that now stood in front of the attack, only but a blinding light was visible all throughout the mountain. In a tremendous and resounding explosion, the mountain that once stood on the destructive path of the chakra blast path shattered as chunks of earth scattered ever which way. As the sight of the deaths that now entered in his vision, Naruto paled, and then turned around and growled in righteous fury at the beast that was beginning to once again charge its unfathomable attack. Naruto had to hurry, or another strike like that would deal a very mortal blow to their forces. Naruto stood for a few seconds, getting the feel of the natural energy flowing around him. Red rings began tinting his eyelids as his iris changed from oceanic blue to regal yellow. With speed beyond of a human or shinobi, Naruto made his way towards the beast. The said creature who had began collecting chakra into its mouth, flapped its 6 wings as its 7 hanged loosely as down to the ground. It flapped, higher and higher, as it now reached the dark clouds above, as if finally reaching the ceiling of the world. Lightning danced as the chakra orb constricted and shake with its unstable nature absorbing the bolts of electricity all around its surrounding area. To the remaining of the survivors of the attack inside the capital, they could only gaze as the said monster reared its neck back, let out a tremendous roar. "Stop!" Naruto yelled with all of his might, as he dashed closer and closer to the sight. The beast shot its attack straight to the ground it stood before. As the plant man from Akatsuki runs away to a safe distance, Naruto struggles to get close to the sight as the catastrophe of the projectile enters his mind. He remembered quite well how Yamato pointed to the devastation of his attacks back then against Orochimaru. It was the size of a small village that was destroyed by his fourth-tailed state. As he got close to the walls, the ball of intense and malicious chakra crashed into the ground, giving off a stronger explosion that covered the capital like a dome of white light. The impact of the said assault threw another powerful shockwave all around, as Naruto was suddenly pushed back by the sheer force of the impact of the attack. He could only look on as he was being flung back like a ricochet, crashing to a cliff face and being embedded to it. Naruto watched in mortification and horror as the capital of River Country became no more but a crater. Naruto looked up into the sky, as the beast became no more but a plume of smoke. No trace remained left of Madara in now the former capital of River Country. "Damn you, Madara! Damn you!" Naruto cursed in his anger, as he watched the smoldering ground that now lay before him. He looked up into the sky, and cursed the heavens with all his might. Aim. At the outskirts of the city, 2 people were now ready to leave the city of eternal rain. The pinkette that now stood in front of the new leader of AIM looked solemn for a minute, sympathy begetting her as well as sadness. To which Konan immediately noticed. "What's done is done. Sakura-san, we cannot undo the past. Your sympathy only gives me more grief. I merely gave you the hope of saving the ties that you shared with your most trusted friends. You have learned well, and I hope that you apply what you have learned." Konan gave a serene smile, to which Sakura could only look up. To her side was Shino, who had been given instructions to escort their ambassador to aim back to the front lines and manage the medic corps. Sakura had wondered, however, that it took Shino more days to get to aim than she did, considering the time span that Shino gave her in his very detailed report. As Sakura was about to talk, a hand raised stopped her from doing so. Turning to the bug user, Shino merely shifted his gaze to his right and said, "There is someone who has suddenly appeared in my net of insects. It is best that we prepare ourselves if there is a possible engagement that might occur." Konan looked vigilant to this new predicament as she turned her eyes towards where Shino was looking. The silent boy had a lot of body language to tell off. Speaking only when needed, the boy often used gestures as his words to mention anything of note. Shino stayed sharp as bugs now slowly crawled their way down to his arms, and some crawled up to his face. Sakura looked sharp, her hands already covered by her gloves, as the three of them were preparing themselves for the worst. As they heard the sound of shoes slowly walking on wet ground, they turned to look at the source of the noise. Sakura stood surprised at the sight before her. It didn't seem to make sense that the person she was meant to chase down chose to come to her instead. It was a turn of incredible luck, depending on which, she had no idea if it was good or bad for her, as the one that she had sought after for the past 3 years, the person that Naruto wanted to bring back, the person that she wanted, more than anything, to save and show him what family was like again. There stood in front of her was Uchiha Sasuke, who looked paler the last time she saw him. As traces of blood fell from his lips, she couldn't help but wonder why. "Sakura," Sasuke stated, as he unsheathed his blade. Kusanagi was ready to fire up with electric charges. "I want you to heal me," was his simple demand, his sword glowing with the current of lightning surging at the blade. Walking towards their group in calm manner, he headed towards Konan slowly. His sword crackled as the bolts of lightning danced to the edge of his blade. With but a simple dash, Sasuke was about to strike, only to be blocked by Sakura, whose hands glowed in blue chakra and punching the ground to destroy Sasuke's charge. "Ukashu, cherry blossom impact!" Sakura shouted. The ground beneath her shattered like glass, splinting up from the force as fissures began to form all around the two former allies. Sasuke jumped back from the sudden devastation that Sakura had dealt. He looked sharply towards his former teammate as she readjusted her gloves. "The next time, I'm aiming to your face, Sasuke-kun," she said in monotone, this time completely serious. No more would she fear of harming Sasuke to the inch of death, no more would she be scared of his well-being if she beats him. Like Naruto, she would do this even if it meant beating the sense down into Sasuke's head. "Your vigilantism ends now," she continued. Sasuke frowned, before looking at the other female on the opposite side. Suigetsu grinned. He hefted Kubikiri Hocho to his shoulder and said, "Well now, I thought this whole trip would be boring as hell. I guess I was wrong. Maybe you do have some form of fighting ability, Pinky." Sakura was about to retort until Shino spoke. "It would be unwise of you to downplay our fighting capabilities this early." Bugs started to fly around the hood-wearing shinobi, as the insects began spinning faster and faster like a whirlwind around him. The bug boy continued, "After all, even the most unassuming can have devastating results." With that, Konan's body began to form cracks as she turned to paper. "Do not for once let your guard down," the former Akatsuki member said, countless papers slowly folding to origami-shaped shuriken. "Or you'll be killed instantly," Sakura mentioned as she squatted down, her right hand cuffed into a fist still on the floor. Karen looked at the papers spinning in the air as she felt the older woman's chakra in every paper she had unleashed. It felt baffling as her chakra seemed to have gone everywhere, forcing her technique to haywire. So much was the presence that she felt she couldn't tell how they would defeat this person who had divided her chakra to every paper she had seen in this area. Suigetsu otherwise grinned. It may not be the first time they had faced a Kage-level shinobi here on their own, but it always involved a quirky technique that would force them to adapt to the situation. The prodigy of Zabuza looked over to his left and saw Jugo slowly letting the curse seal have a partial transformation on him, as his right eye soon changed with the scara turning to a jet black color, and the iris turning to bright yellow. I guess we have no choice then. We'll have to kill the two people around the pink-haired girl, then we'll force her to heal Sasuke, said the giant of a man, his bloodlust slowly seeping out like a stream. Shino now dissolved from the storm of insects that surrounded him, indicating his initiative to attack. I wouldn't be too sure if I were you, said the bug boy, his face now fully dissolving from their view. Suigetsu suddenly cursed at this and shouted, "Crap! Don't let any of his bugs get near you or you're dead." I would prefer if you would call them insects, said Shino, reappearing behind Suigetsu, who had swung his gigantic blade at the Aburame. Suigetsu cursed as his blade had little resistance as it passed through Shino. Jugo was about to help, but he suddenly jumped back when he saw a paper shuriken narrowly hitting him in the face. He looked up to see the winged form of Konan, her right arm outstretched as the paper shuriken turned back to its owner, and reforming on her palm. Sasuke looked up to their target. It would seem a katon jutsu would suffice for her, as her body would be far too flammable. The Uchiha was about to do his sequence of hand seals until he stopped and saw Sakura slowly walking towards him as she adjusted her gloves. "I'm your opponent, Sasuke-kun." Sasuke raised his eyebrow in sheer curiosity. How could Sakura be able to keep up with him? He had remembered the girl almost dying by his hand when they first met again back in Orochimaru's base. As he contemplated as to how Sakura would exactly fight him, Sasuke's vision suddenly turned blurry. As he was watching Sakura turning into a haze and back again, he felt the pain of the poison slowly making their way towards his brain. It was slowly crippling him down. It meant he couldn't be as fast as he used to. He gripped Kusanagi tightly. As his hand shook at the grip, it was difficult to just even stand there and waiting for Sakura to attack. But it would not make a difference, or so he thought. As to him, Sakura would always remain as the weakest link in their Team 7. An earth-shattering punch suddenly shook the ground as fissures suddenly formed and gave way to the earth below as the force of the attack shattered the ground instantly. Sasuke, who was surprised by this sudden move, instead of jumping back, he jumped up, only to see Sakura above, her skin now as black as charcoal, right fist primed to punch him in the face. As her shadow loomed on Sasuke's vision, the Uchiha's eyes widened as the chakra that Sakura had been building up in her right hand had enough potential to kill him there. Smash! River Country, Capital Ruins. It was already morning. The deafening silence in the skies of the once enchanted city seemed to be on every person's mind as they saw the destruction that was caused by a bijou. By now, Tsunade's reinforcements had arrived, in the form of the Kage and his required battalions to join in the forces of the Alliance. He, too, could see the carnage that took place in the village before it being obliterated of the map. As the Kage walked through the rubble, he could see his friend trying desperately to find any survivor of the attack. His hands dug through the rubble, as it bled profusely from the cuts it had received trying hard to get stone, metal and wood out of the way. The blonde was kneeling as he did so, forcing his tired and bloody hands to find any sign of life, until he stopped as he saw a cold hand of a child, still holding a doll. He looked absolutely catatonic for a few seconds as his body remained rigid at the sight that stood before him. He slowly grit his teeth, his rage was gripping his head like a vice, as he forced himself to stand. "I'm going to kill him. I'll kill Madara!" Naruto shouted as he punched the rock beneath him, shattering the stone to small pieces. "I'll stop him!" Naruto punched another rock. "I'll find him!" Another rock. "I'm not going to let another sacrifice happen in his name," said the blonde, punching the stone shattering from the force of his attack. "Naruto!" Gaara reached for his shoulder as the blonde looked at his friend. His eyes were close to tears. He said, "I couldn't do a damn thing. I didn't expect this kind of thing from Madara. I couldn't see what he did to this village. I couldn't save them." To him, this wasn't a victory. It was too hollow and too horrifying to be considered one. What Gaara didn't get, though, was why. Why did Madara do it? Why would he want to destroy this village if it meant that it was one of his most valuable allies? What would he gain by simply destroying this village? As questions littered in Gaara's mind, he couldn't help but feel perturbed at this turn of events. Gaara looked over to the appearance of the rising sun. His eyes squinted for a moment as dread began to well up inside him. He could only pray for their success. As now, it looked like things are about to get much worse. Chapter 15, Inverse. Smash! Sasuke was fortunate to have escaped with a hair's breadth. That punch that Sakura did shattered the log he replaced himself with. He looked around, seeing Sakura chase after him like a rabid bloodhound. Sasuke cursed as he backpedaled as fast as he can. As he then jumped to the grove that surrounded the metropolis-like village of Aim, Sasuke used his arm and grabbed a strong branch. He swung to his right, feeling his weight almost tearing his arm off. He let go off the branch as he landed on a sturdy trunk. Just as he saw Sakura's back exposed, he lit up his Chidori for a second before feeling the effects of Kabuto's poison encroaching his system. Sasuke coughed blood as the sound of chirping of his jutsu was immediately noticed. Sakura, for her part, flipped in mid-air and landed on another sturdy trunk. Her knees bent as her weight shifted downwards before giving a tremendous leap at Sasuke. Sasuke immediately saw this with his Sharingan, as the pinkette dashed towards him, her hand glowing in blue chakra as she was about to deliver a devastating punch. Inwardly cursing, Sasuke ran up the trunk and jumped to another one, as the tree that he stood on before shattered from the immense power that Sakura had used. This is like the time when I faced Gaara in his demon form. She's putting the weight lower for a higher output in velocity and using Shunshin no Jutsu. If I hadn't dodged in time, I would have seriously died. It's a good thing that the startup of that technique is slow compared to my speed and too linear that it's too predictable. As Sakura stood on another branch, this time on the same level with Sasuke, the Uchiha had one thought in mind. I can't underestimate her. Sasuke-kun. Back then when you said thank you, what did you truly mean when you said that? Sakura asked, as she squatted down and started pumping chakra to her legs. Sasuke only replied, it's not for you to know. Sakura closed her eyes for a moment and jumped back. She descended to the ground below, escaping Sasuke's vision. He had noticed it though. Sakura was avoiding full-on eye contact. He inwardly grinned. The perfect technique to disable a person happened to be a technique Sakura wanted to avoid. It seemed that only an Uchiha or a perfect Jinchuriki was able to counter such a powerful genjutsu. Silence fell in the grove, as the rustles in the leaves swayed from the wind that it brought. Sasuke remained unmoving, trying to feel Sakura with her chakra. He tried to concentrate as he forced himself to feel something that would indicate a movement of the girl. It was then that he heard a powerful rustle. Sasuke looked to his back as leaves fell from the ground. Another rustle and Sasuke turned around, the fallen leaves dancing as they descend to the ground. His Sharingan started looking around, feeling the rustle was Sakura's movement. It was like she was moving to his blind sides like a ricochet, jumping and changing directions every trunk that would ever get in her way. It was then that Sakura had appeared above, her skin as black as ash once again, as she descended on Sasuke, her right leg extending upward, about to strike him with a powerful axe kick. Tsutenkyaku, painful sky leg. It was then that Sasuke jumped out of the way as Sakura's leg tore through the tree that he stood on before finally crashing through the ground with a thunderous boom. Seeing his chance, Sasuke leaped into the dust and smoke that spread from where Sakura stood. His Sharingan fully active, he shielded his eyes after drawing Kusanagi from its scabbard and landed on the ground. Sakura immediately saw Sasuke descend upon her like a hawk, his right hand holding his Chikuto as it tried to slash Sakura down and disable her. To her credit, she instinctively reacted and leaned to her right, evading the slash and the tip touching her cheek. But Sasuke did not draw blood. The sword and Sakura's ash-colored skin gave a resounding high-pitched sound as if a sword clashed with a sword. The tip of the blade gave a tiny spark as the sword went past Sakura. Immediately seeing her chance, Sakura cocked her right fist back, and without proper collection of chakra for an instant attack, she smashed her iron-enforced fist to his gut. Sasuke felt the sudden pain electrifying him, as he coughed out blood before being sent flying from the blow in a powerful force, colliding with several trees before being entrenched on the ground and halting before a large stone. Sasuke tried to get up but could feel the pain of his body instantly coming back full force. It was hard to even breathe. He cradled his side as he felt a sudden pain from his right side. From what he could feel, Some of his ribs were shattered from that last attack. If he hadn't stepped back a little that time, he would have met that punch full force. It suddenly occurred to him that Sakura had him in dead to rights. She could literally kill him if she got close enough and exploited his weakness now. As long as she was out of his sights, it was futile. As long as she doesn't make any eye contact with him, it was useless, and it was even harder just to capture her. It was a hard situation indeed. Sasuke stood up. There was only one jutsu to stop her attack. Based from how powerful her defense was, Sasuke guessed that it was a Doton-based ninjutsu. It was hard just trying to pump chakra around his body. Hell, he can't properly form Susanoo right now, so this was his best shot. The Uchiha planted Kusanagi on the ground and crossed his arms in an X-like position. He closed his eyes and concentrated. The flow of chakra seemed restricted. He could feel it, as any way of exerting himself would aggravate the damage done by Kabuto's poison. He concentrated, as Sakura had suddenly tried to capitalize at the exact moment. Sakura dashed at Sasuke, her hand now glowing with blue energy as she made her way towards the Uchiha. She wouldn't go for a killing blow, no, she had realized just how valuable Sasuke's knowledge on Madara would be. Konan had said that although she was exposed to the plans of Akatsuki and most of their bases, Madara didn't share any information about himself, probably due to the fact that he didn't trust any more of his members as did Nagato and Itachi. They had differing goals, each one of them, and Madara remained the most mysterious. He came and go as he pleased, and went to places that he wouldn't mention. Madara was careful, cautious, cunning, and had more secrets than anyone could possibly ever have. If Madara had exposed Sasuke to one of his strategic locations, it might probably be where his main base of operations reside, something that Sasuke may have information about. Dashing towards Sasuke with his back turned, Sakura prepared for a brutal punch on Sasuke's back. This would paralyze Sasuke for good. It had been bothering her that Sasuke wasn't able to whip out jutsu after jutsu when she attacked. As a single Chidori could have probably done the job, but nonetheless she had to take advantage of what she has. Sasuke had requested, no, demanded that he be relieved from his sickness or whatever seems to be bothering him. She could possibly do it. But the problem was that Sasuke has to answer to a lot of questions first. As Sakura dashed towards the Uchiha at her best speed, Sasuke had outstretched his hands sideways as Sasuke spread his legs to have a wider base and shouting forcefully with gritted teeth. Chidori Nagashi. Chirping of 1,000 birds current. Lightning danced and sparked its way all around Sasuke, piercing Sakura's domu, Earth's spear, as it literally began to eat the iron-like skin that Sakura had adapted earlier. Sakura screamed in pain as she fell to the ground, sliding and entrenching herself a little as she went straight to Sasuke's position. Her jutsu slowly dispelling, the effect of the Earth's spear was slowly crumbling away. Sasuke stood over his former teammate as he was gasping for air. Just controlling his chakra was getting even more difficult. Now Sakura, you will heal me. As Sasuke leaned down and tried to grab the girl, Sakura suddenly sprang up and nailed Sasuke in the cheek with a strong punch. It was a surprise move, his Sharingan deactivated. Sasuke had thought he had finally stopped this uphill battle. But when Sakura had suddenly sprung up like that, he had been totally unprepared for that punch straight to his face. The force of the blow flapped the opposite cheek that Sakura had hit as Sasuke was thrown back by the immense strength. Sasuke tumbled across the muddy ground, before hitting a large rock behind him. Sakura approached Sasuke in apathy as she had a kunai ready just in case. Sakura looked at Sasuke's unconscious form that seemed unmoving as of now. Just in case, Sakura had activated her chakra scalpel and began cutting off tendons so that Sasuke can't move. With that, she carried the Uchiha on her shoulders as she began to trek her way back to AIM, intent on getting the answers that they need and finally putting a stop to this war. Suigetsu vs. Shino. Suigetsu thought he had chosen the wrong opponent to pick a fight, or rather, the bug boy had apparently prevented him from facing the former Akatsuki member. He was the weak point of the woman. But unfortunately a Konoha ninja, who can suck chakra with tiny bugs, had happened to prevent him from doing so. Did Madara not calculate the fact that the woman would have another escort? If so, that masked bastard better try to come up with a good excuse next time they see him. because there was no way in hell would he ever let that madman use them like he did back at the summit ever again. As Suigetsu was immediately surrounded with insects, the apprentice of Momochi Zabuza liquefied himself, crawling away from the swarm of bugs that tried to stick close to him. As he got out, Suigetsu smirked to himself as he drew Kubikiri Hocho once again. He looked at the bug boy who was merely walking towards him with his hands in his pocket, seemingly calm in the whole fight. It was then that Suigetsu felt himself slightly drained. He noticed that his jutsu earlier used more chakra than it needed to. He inwardly cursed as Shino held out his right index finger, and an insect landed rather gently on the tip of the nail. Give up. The fact that my swarm has surrounded you should be an indication of the advantage that I possess and the handicap that you wield. Suigetsu smirked. Even if you tried to consume my chakra, it would be too slow. I'm made of water, as such, your bugs would have a hard time consuming that energy. Are you sure it was wise to pick me as an opponent? It was then that mist had started to form around them, as Suigetsu's smirk turned into a vicious, toothy smile. Shino's visible eyebrow rose to a certain point but remained quiet. I know that insects can detect other insects through the release of subtle aromas like pheromones. But if I had enough moisture to dull those senses, I wonder if they would ever coordinate an attack like you do. It was then that the fog surrounding the two fighters got thicker and thicker as the toothy boy said, Ninpo, Kirigakyu no Jutsu, ninja art, hidden mist technique. Suigetsu then added under the veil of the fog, I'm not the student of the acclaimed Momochi Zabuza for nothing. And from what I remember of Zabuza, he was proficient in this style. I prefer a much more direct approach, but I can't afford that to someone like you. Suigetsu mentioned. The temperature around seemed to have decreased somewhat. As Shino kept his guard up, he could feel the temperature around him decrease to an even colder one. From the outside, one would wonder how much fog has gathered around the small grove near a water source just outside the metropolis of Aim. Inside, Shino remained calm as he stepped to the right and heard a sword being swung down, almost cleaving him in two. Shino forcefully stepped on the blunt part of the gigantic blade with his left foot, as he outstretched his right hand and punched the one who attacked his back earlier. A splash was heard throughout the fight as Shino was about to yank Kubikiri Hocho away from Suigetsu's grasp. How? Suigetsu asked before pulling his sword against Shino's hand away, jumping back. Shino looked eerily calm as he stepped forth in Suigetsu's direction. How did you know I would be coming from that direction? I've made no sound, no indication that I would be coming at you from there. Suigetsu asked in a serious tone. No person is capable of producing no sound. I may have not heard you, but the vibrations that you caused are loud enough for insects to detect, like a door being slammed open. Shino answered for him. It was then Suigetsu noticed that the bugs that flew in the air were minimal compared earlier. The ground, however, seemed to have the said bugs crawling around. Insects have the ability to sense enough vibrations on the ground. They flee whenever they feel that the ground near them is stepped. I took advantage of that trait they have and simply have some of them stay there to detect where you come from. With how they move and how they communicate, I immediately sense it and do the most appropriate action. Suigetsu's scowl turned into a smile again as he hefted the giant blade on his shoulders again. Well, damn it. It looks like I'm going to have to put more effort into this than I thought. Suigetsu then began to liquefy, splashing on the ground as the atmosphere around the two combatants began to condense. The puddle that was Suigetsu began separating like cells initiating mitosis as it began to separate into 6 puddles. The puddles then began to rise up from the ground, forming a humanoid figure. All of them formed the figure of the shark-like boy holding the heavy sword on their shoulders. All of them gave confident smirks as they all said in unison, Suetun, Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu, water release, water clone technique. It was then that the clones began initiating the stance of the Muon Satsujin Jutsu, the art of silent killing. Each of them silently treading around the heavily dense fog. Shino looked down and saw many of his insects scramble every which way, spreading around and causing enough chaos that he barely registered in time that 2 clones of the swordsman had appeared on both his sides. One had the blade aimed high horizontally to his neck while the other was leaning forward below, about to cut his legs off. Shino was quick to react, as he spun in the middle of the two, letting both clones go past him as the 2 said clones stared on in surprise at the bug man. Shino landed perfectly between the two as he gathered some of his insects from the ground to around his hands and raised it in an arc, completely tossing them in a wave towards the two clones. A small disruption of the chakra produced in them, and they quickly dispelled and cascaded on the ground, turning into puddles. The Aburame looked on the ground and monitored his insects erratically going about. He could not detect which was which. Suigetsu's steps were precise, and used his colony's sensitivity to vibrations at its fullest. Shino had to acknowledge one fact about the man he was fighting. He was a master assassin. This time, 3 identical images of Suigetsu headed towards him. They were all in striking distance already as they leapt toward Shino, aiming for his chest, legs and neck. They came at him from his back, and 2 from his opposite sides. In an immediate rush of seals, Shino quickly replaced himself with a log just before the 3 enormous blades could slice him to pieces. The log splintered and scattered as the 3 scowled at the sudden change. They were sure they had him. Shino had suddenly appeared from the side of one clone, giving the said clone with one smack on his right forearm, quickly returning as a puddle on the ground. Another Shino had then appeared from below one clone and quickly dispelled, revealing a huge swarm as it surrounded the second Suigetsu clone and consuming the chakra. The final clone had the back of its head grabbed as the insects crawled from Shino's arm, quickly dispelling it. I admit that I am impressed at your skill in using the infamous Muon Satsujin Jutsu. Barely a few members of our ANBU have this level of skill. Shino commented, trying to force out a reply from Suigetsu, who was silent throughout the whole ordeal. Shino merely stood there, waiting for the next set of movements that his insects might show. His insects remained in stasis, causing Shino inwardly perturbed. His opponent could have gone for Conan right about now, and those clones could have only served as a distraction. He knew that a paper master like Conan had weakness in the form of liquid. It was probably the reason why his bugs were on stasis. I have you now, thought the person, who was now high above Shino. He wasn't making a sound. He was as silent as the gentle wind and as cold as ice, sword held sideways. He strikes down Shino from his shoulder blade, down to his stomach. Suigetsu landed with one knee on the ground. He didn't look back at his victim. He never needed to, for he had expected blood to spill from that. Something definitely spilled, but it wasn't the sound of a shower that he had expected. Instead, tendrils of bugs had escaped from the jacket, revealing the boy wearing sunglasses on his long-sleeve undershirt. The swarm of insects at his side holding what seemed to be his hoodie that was sliced cleanly in 2. Suigetsu didn't feel himself move, as the bugs started to consume him, eating away his chakra. His expression of shock was present all over. It was the 3rd time in his whole life that he was surprised, and the first 2 involved the 2 monstrous Jinchuriki of Konoha and Kumo. How did you? Suigetsu was interrupted by Shino in a matter-of-fact voice. Know that you were going to attack me there? It seems that you have forgotten one of the primary principles of Muon Satsujin. Shino continued. Suigetsu began to shake as the bugs started to consume his chakra, contemplating on the one most important principle in Muon Satsujin Jutsu. Always attack from the back. It was the most important rule in the style that Zabuza taught him. To perform this means to use the exposed back of the opponent as the target, to walk silently and to tread fast. It was the matter of execution that made Zabuza such a master of it. It seems that you caught on. Indeed, Muon Satsujin is a force to be reckoned with. It's so silent that you will never even realize that you already died. The skill of the practitioner of such an art should not be taken lightly. Even a Jinchuriki could fall given the right preparation and situation. Suigetsu's body was slowly and literally being covered by insects, crawling on his skin and seeping away at his energy, as Shino continued. However, its primary principle is also its main weakness, thus making it predictable. Therefore, a solution on this was to come up with a plan to lure the original user out, a deception to counter a deception, as Shikamaru and Hokage-sama put it. With that, Suigetsu's body became fully covered with insects as the Aburame continued. Do not fret, and rest assured that I will be sparing you alive. Your information is valuable in ending such a pointless war. Suigetsu couldn't feel anything at that moment, as it all eventually turned black. Jugo vs. Conan. Pity. It was all that Conan felt as she saw the monster that was the tall orange-haired man going on about, trashing wildly at her as she evaded every blow delivered against her. The man before her was a berserker, a mindless fighter drawn on the axe of violence and bloodlust, but earlier, he seemed tranquil, awkward. The man didn't seem like a person of violence, it was more like he hated to show such brutal force, he hated fighting. It reminded her about Nagato so much except for this particular mood swing. "Get back here!" The monster roared, his body contorting and shape-shifting once more, as his back began to grow holes with chakra seemingly being concentrated in them. Conan dispersed herself in a sea of paper cranes, surrounding Jugo as he blasted all around with beams of chakra to every which way. Conan looked perturbed. This wasn't the man that she had noticed earlier. The man earlier was soft-spoken, always concerned, and did not look anyone in the eye. He was easily intimidated. This person was different. He was more psychopathic, insane, and bloodthirsty. The markings that he showed around his face before definitely indicated one of Orochimaru's experiments, more precisely, the cursed seal. Conan could only do some kind of sympathy for the man. Perhaps the seal hasn't truly disappeared yet? No, that would not be the case. The seal was tied with Orochimaru's life force. Even a small sliver of life was enough to maintain the seal. Then what on earth is this person? Jugo gave another unbalanced grin as his hands morphed to another appendage that Conan immediately noticed. According to Sasori, whose spy was the double agent Kabuto, those branded with the curse seal are given a set beast-like transformation that gives them a special ability in accordance to said transformation. Not only that, there was also an added text that there may have been some minor psychological influence given by the seal. So how is it that this person in front of her could shift from one form to another, and how is it that the seal affects his psyche so much? Jugo's hands finally finished transforming once again, as Conan landed behind him, forming herself from the countless paper cranes that she had transformed into earlier. Her hand outstretched, paper began compressing into a thin spear. Just before her palm it floated like it was made for flight. Chakra condensed and formed thin as each paper condensed into one shape, the shape of a perfect javelin spear. It is a pity that your whole existence was bent on violence and urges you have no control over. Do not worry, for I shall end your suffering. The last of the papers then stuck itself at the near tip. The perfectly cone-shaped-like spear completed, she aimed it at Jugo, whose left hand turned into a talon-like appendage. Conan instantly fired the spear made of paper, as the said object left gale forces strong enough to cause a sonic boom in its wake, entrenching the ground below as the spear traveled at an enormous speed. Jugo, clearly seeing the danger he was in, had let the full power of the cursed seal take him over quickly, and used his other arm to create a shield and block the spear with his said arm. The spear managed to reach to the shield, skidding Jugo back as his feet were entrenching the ground that he stood on. Dirt and rubble picked up and scattered as Jugo tried his best in stopping the spear made of paper as the said paper began dispersing, one page at a time. Jugo tried to put his weight forward with his talon-like right arm grasping his left as if trying to lighten the strain from the force of the impact. 30 meters later, the strain on his left arm was too much and felt the limit of his human endurance shatter, sending him flying and tumbling on the ground. As Jugo tried to get up, he looked over to his left arm. It was limp and bleeding all over. He looked over at the former member of Akatsuki walking towards him as paper started to collect around her once again, dancing around and began folding, turning to small windmills. For the first time, Jugo could feel dread as Conan was walking over towards him with no trace of emotion. It rotated and spun around Conan, as it soon began spinning faster and faster, before the said objects flew towards him like spinning shuriken. Kaminari shuriken, paper shuriken, Conan mentioned simply, with no hint of hesitation. Jugo shielded himself with his only enabled arm as he felt the sting of each blade going past through him, or embedding itself at him. Gaha! Jugo writhed in agony as he fell on the ground with a hard plop. Conan stared at the boy in front of her. The orange hair was reminding her of Yahiko. But Yahiko was never soft-spoken, that was Nagato, and both weren't psychopaths like this one. Jugo looked up at the woman. As she gave him a frown, Jugo could feel the pity in her eyes as she stared at him from above. Conan raised her hand and paper seemed to form into the spear that she had done earlier. Jugo looked absolutely scared. No wonder the woman was a member of Akatsuki. She was absolutely terrifying in battle, almost the same like Sasuke was, and that blonde Hokage who had lodged him to the wall. "Jugo!" shouted a redhead. Konan eyed her with a frown of her own, before deflecting a set of shuriken with her spear made of paper. Jugo suddenly took his chance, tackling Konan to the ground as she was taken by surprise. But it all seemed for naught as Konan scattered and began latching on his skin like leeches sucking out the life out of him. As Konan reformed from her state, she looked at the area where that redhead had appeared from. She was nowhere in sight. Konan held her hand towards the paper-wrapped Jugo, finding his kneeling and struggling form. She was about to do the deed, until she closed her eyes and stopped. Even though it was the wrong thing to do, the most illogical thing to do, to her, right now, her love of her friends meant more than reason. No, this isn't what Nagato believed in. This isn't how he would have done it after meeting Naruto. Jugo struggled for a moment before falling unconscious. Madara's request for Konan's assassination had failed. Unknown location. Madara sat on a chair, purely out of necessity. He was shaking earlier. It had been a long time since he had controlled the bijou, and just as he remembered, it was taxing, winding, and absolutely horrendous. The strain of controlling the bijou increases with each increase of tails. He grasped the arms of his chairs as he was bracing for the intense pain about to come. He looked to his right and saw the countless collections of Sharingan placed in the jars. In a sick and twisted sense of mementos, the man that had left his clan out of contempt stored the Sharingan of his dead family members in jars. He looked at them with mild fascination and said, "Just a few more steps and all is complete." He then removed his mask and placed it in front of his table. He grasped his face as his right Sharingan came to life once more. "Everything will end. And all will be with me." Alliance Camp, Iron Country. 5 of the 6 leaders of the Alliance had now met in complete battle attires. All of them wore their hats to signify their position as Kage. They sat down on a round table. All of them looked battle-weary since 2 nights ago. The Kiri Konoha forces had managed to meet up with their forces 3 days ago, and had to move. Ryutenbi no Inoki eyed the young leader of Konoha in front of him. To say the least, he was disappointed. After months into this alliance, the Hokage indeed was inexperienced in dealing troops. Perhaps that fool Mifune had been relying too much in emotion. He scowled at the Hokage, who looked absolutely sullen all throughout the campaigns. Inoki shook his head. He was right. He was still a child. Not to mention, the rumors of his incognito were putting a dent into the morale of the troops. "Do you realize the gravity of our situation, Hokage Dano?" he asked in a stern and angered manner. Naruto didn't respond. How could he? That Tsuchikage had a point. "You almost cost us a war with the whole world's fate at stake. Do you think it was easy enough to have control over an alliance such as ours?" That Tsuchikage bellowed. Naruto replied in anger, "Then what was I supposed to do? Do I just let an army guard me while we need most of our soldiers to the front lines? Would I feel safe knowing that the greatest threat to humanity is out there that can bypass most of our men and take me away in an instant? If we want to win this war, then we need to do everything we can. That includes all of us, be it mentally or physically. Don't think that you're the only one who has been doing their best here. You are a Kage. You sit at the back as you watch your soldiers fight and die for you and your village. The least you could have done is to have given them the morale that they need the most. Do you not trust your own men?" Inoki roared. Naruto was taken back by this. As Gaara voiced his own opinion, the threat of Madara does indeed put us in a precarious position, now that he has the Federation under his thumb. I've had doubts reasoning that most of the minor countries aren't aware just how important people like us were and how dangerous Akatsuki was. It was a matter of feeding the other villages with information that we lacked. Quite simply, we lost in a war of propaganda for the minor countries, something that we had not been prepared for so early on. We were one step too late against Madara. All of us are to blame for this, not just the commander. The issue here is not the minor countries, Kazekage Dano. The issue here is that Hokage Dano has left his post to finalize his skills as a shinobi without ever being there for most of us, without ever informing us. Isn't that one form of neglect? Asked Inoki. To this the Mizukage looked down and nodded her head. It is indeed true that abandoning your post on such a crucial time is an offense worthy of imprisonment. I admit even I had my doubts that Hokage Danzo was clearly not the best choice to become the Supreme Commander. He isn't ready for a responsibility that would entail being a newly appointed Kage. It takes years to master the craft of leadership. The choice was foolish for all of us in the first place. We had relied on our emotion too much out of desperation. It was then that the Hokage had spoken. I agree that we had met the wrong choice in the matter in this. It seems the idea that Konoha was the only village that still possessed their host back then had blinded us from the fact that their Kage is still a young man. I agree that we had made a terrible mistake in this. I'm sorry, Hokage Danzo, you are not meant to be the Supreme Commander as of now. As the second in command, I will be the one to lead where you left off. It is only right. Inoki had raised his hand to make a point. That is acceptable, but what about Hokage Danzo? Mifune looked at the sullen leader, and closed his eyes as he started to take a deep breath. After this is over, we will determine his punishment. But seeing as how the Battle of River Country went down and the crucial information he has given us, we should give leniency on the decision. Gaara looked at the Hokage and closed his eyes as well for a moment before finally saying, "The host for the Eight Tails, Killer Bee, is he in safe custody as of now?" The Hokage nodded, as the Mizukage's visible eyebrow raised. What is the Kazekage planning? I just asked if the Eight Tails would be participating in this war. Gaara eyed the blonde with concern. He already had an idea on how to deal with this. If he played his cards right, then Naruto would be safe and alive. No, I've decided to place him to an island that is completely safe for him. I know that place as we trained there from time to time when we were younger. He's about to depart in 3 days' time, so we need an escort there to see him off. Killer, he said. Gaara's eye twitched as Naruto was listening intently. To his side, Shikamaru had kept quiet about the whole ordeal but realized that Inoki had a point. There was nothing that Naruto could do now. Very well, we shall prepare now for the next meeting and encounter, the Hokage mentioned. As soon as they all got out of the tent, most of the Jounin outside stared as each of the Kages were frowning. None of them were pleased about how things were turning out. And it seemed like dissent was flowing already. Once Naruto arrived on his tent, he sat down on his bed and looked down. Am I really the savior of this world? Naruto thought, looking down on his hands. He closed them as his hands shook. Doubt was beginning to enter his mind. Did he do the right thing? Did he really not trust his men? Had he doomed the whole world? Naruto punched his bed slightly out of frustration. This couldn't have happened if he had just acted earlier on. But no, it wasn't just that. He realized how selfish of him that the alliance had almost lost. He bit his lower lip so tightly that it drew blood. He had failed his sensei, his father, his mother, and everyone in Konoha. He had failed them all. Was this the extent of his will of fire? He held his face with his palms and held the sides of his head in frustration. In the end, he was a failure through and through. Hokage-sama, the figure said as Naruto looked up. He saw Kakashi enter into the tent. Kakashi-sensei, what's wrong? Naruto asked curiously as Kakashi took a deep breath and spoke to him. Kazekage-sama has told me to come and get you to talk in his tent. It seemed urgent as he himself approached me along with Shikamaru. You have to hear what he has to say. Naruto nodded. As he sat up and exited his own tent, he went towards the Tsunade army's side of the encampment. There, many of the folks that recognized him bowed in immediate respect, and some even waved with a smile. Naruto could only wave back with a smile of his own. Once he had reached the big tent with the character of wind engraved on top, Naruto entered inside immediately. Gaara was sitting on the table and waited patiently for the blonde. Naruto, I want to discuss with you about what happened earlier. Gaara started as Naruto immediately sat down. What happened earlier was a mistake in all of us. The old Tsuchikage, though he was better than before, is still pompous and too realistic. He has made mistakes just like you did, but he had never once admitted to them until recently. Do you get where I'm coming from? Gaara asked. Naruto nodded. As the redhead continued, I know it is wrong of me to take away your freedom of choice as to participate in this war, but remember that we are the only barrier that is preventing Madara to get his hands on you, and we have to rely on the most competent of people to get the job done. Though you might not like it, I feel it is the only way to keep you alive and away from Madara's grasp. But my responsibilities here will only lead to your capture. Gaara interrupted him. As he then said to the blonde, with things the way they are now, we need a unified commanding center. I think you can do it, but the doubts set upon by the Tsuchikage and the Reikage had been great. If this continues, then before we might even know it, we would lose the war. Naruto stood up at this. How am I supposed to protect them then? How am I supposed to be safe from my enemy if I can't do anything? Naruto, it is true that what you did was very reckless. You left your office, but at least you had to do it because of one thing. I've realized it now more than ever, that what you did was both a foolishness and brilliance. Gaara looked to his side and grabbed a scroll. This scroll was a report on what happened days before your inauguration. I can understand the need of you to finally take control of what it was that hindered your progress. Even if you cannot participate in war, your rage would have most likely taken over and we would have a problem worse than Madara, Kyuubi's inevitable return if you didn't do it. Gaara said. Naruto nodded and said, that's right, I needed to do it. I gave in to my rage when Danzo mentioned that he had my mother killed. Even right now, I'm still angry at that guy. It is such a shame that it had come to this. In the end, even if the world is at stake, politics still shapes this world. Gaara sighed. Naruto couldn't help but agree. As both young leaders discussed that night, Naruto realized more and more on what he needed to do. But in order to do it, I'll need the help of the Eight Tails host. Naruto thought as he exited the tent when both were done for the night. As he entered his tent, Naruto placed the quadrilateral hat before his chair with an amused look and said with a melancholic smile. He had decided. The next morning. Your what? Killary asked, utterly confused as to how the young leader spoke. You said you wanted a form of punishment, right? Well then, accept my proposal. I'm willing to take the fall if the alliance fails. Naruto mentioned in a smirk. Inoki shook his head out of disbelief. But to relinquish your title aside from being sent to the island with B-san this early on. What on earth is going on in your mind, Hokage Dano? It's simple. We'll only bicker if this continues on. We can't have a fight like this over past mistakes. This is all our faults, but I'm willing to take the blame for this by agreeing to the punishment. I'm willing to relinquish my title as the Hokage with a 3-year exile from my homeland if it meant winning this war and stopping you all from committing senseless mistakes like I did. I've sent a team of messengers already for my predecessor, and she'll be here in 3 days' time. In the meantime, I will participate in most of the plans already laid out. This is my solution to the problem I've caused. I have to pay for the price itself since I was the one in command of our troops, and I was completely caught off guard at being the supreme commander. Naruto hoped that this would work, for it was the only thing that would free him from all of this crap. It was the only thing that would finally set him loose and finish things once and for all. His prankster self has never been so alive right now. This would be his biggest prank yet, and this time, Madara and the world would be his target. And by hell, he'll kick that son of bitch's ass even if it meant he would lose his title. It was high time to get this done. Gaara had only given a simple nod, and with a small smile, he asked Naruto, what would you gain if you sacrifice your title as Hokage? Wasn't it your dream to become one? Naruto gave Gaara a thumb up and said, there's no denying that, and right now, I'm happy that I've finally experienced what a leader is like. A leader? Naruto looked up for once and continued, he seemed resigned to his fate. Is ready to sacrifice everything if it meant his people would be safe. Gaara looked like he would none of it, but in reality, the blonde was right. In order to be a great leader, one must first relinquish what he can if it meant his people would thrive, even if it was everything he knew and loved. Tsurumime could only look on in shock as she said, I've never seen a man act so foolish yet wise at the same time. Gaara gave a small smile, that is the Uzumaki Naruto that I once knew. For the first time in a long while, Naruto gave a wide, toothy grin. 3 days later. It had been 3 days since he was captured, 3 days since he was healed, and right now, he was locked up in a prison where his hands were bound with seals preventing him to use ninjutsu to escape. To his front, Suigetsu was laid with the same kind of treatment as he did. The only added feature to this, however, Was the mouth restraints that Suigetsu had? How the guards feed the guy was out of Sasuke's question. He didn't want to know and would probably leave it at that. A loud opening of the metal bars were heard as Sakura and Konan had soon arrived in his cell. Sasuke looked down to where his hands were bound as his former teammate asked him, "Sasuke-kun, you probably know that you guys are now criminals in the eyes of the world." Sasuke remained quiet. He didn't care. He just wanted to fulfill his desire for revenge and restore honor to his slain clan. "I could care less if I'm a criminal or a saint. My target is Danzo, and I want him dead," Sasuke replied. Sakura scowled at this. Konan stopped her and shook her head. "Uchiha-san, I'm a former member of Akatsuki, and I know why Madara wants me dead. But if I must ask, if you want to roam this earth free and in search of Danzo, I can do that. All I ask is the location of where you headed out before you came here." Sasuke looked at the blue-haired woman and then asked, "What's it to you?" "I want to end this senseless war that Nagato and Yahiko has hated. I want it to stop. I don't want AIM to be destroyed again. If you know what it means to honor the memory of your loved ones, then grant my request." Sasuke remained silent for a moment. Before he said, "Madara would kill me and my team if that were to happen." This time, it was Sakura's turn to talk. "We can give you your freedom if you tell us where Madara took you after the summit." But Sasuke, somehow, found a way to smirk. "Really? Then do tell me, how are you planning to do that? Only the Kages can give clemency to a criminal, and last time I've noticed, you aren't Naruto." "Who said anything about clemency?" Sakura asked. Konan seemed to have caught on. Should they let this dangerous man get away so easily? Sakura then added, "On the condition that you don't harm any citizen here or continue on with the assassination, we can let you off scot-free. That is, if you cooperate. If not, then we can associate you as Madara's accomplice." Sasuke was listening intently. At this, his smirk soon changed into a frown as he said to Sakura, "I could care less at that senile old fool. However, if you do grant our freedom, then I will do all your stipulations. Just don't say anything about why I'm doing this." With that, Uchiha Sasuke spoke, and he spoke about everything that had happened since the summit. Outside AIM, Karen had stayed hidden all throughout the 3 days that Sasuke and the others were captured. She couldn't do anything but watch as each of her teammates were taken down and captured. She was lucky to have gotten away. Karen knew the implications if she get caught. AIM was still on lockdown. The reason why Konoha Shinobi had managed to enter here was because of the Hokage and permission from the current leader of the village. As she looked around, she felt the familiar chakra of someone following them. It had been a while since she thought about this. It was like this familiar person was always tailing her, and always keeping an eye on her. The question was, however, why? That familiar presence tailing her was underground. She felt this person had already been trailing them for some time. She thought at first that Sasuke was its target, but it turned out it was her. As she sat down for a moment, she soon realized. Zetsu was tailing her because of the information that she knew. And if by any moment she lets her guard down and tells Sasuke about what happened after he lost consciousness during the summit, then that would mean she would die. Karen had already kept the secret of the Uchiha clan months ago after the summit. She didn't say anything to Sasuke, because she knew that Sasuke was their only chance of defeating such powerful S-class missing Nin. If she had told him back then, Sasuke and their team would have most likely died from his compulsiveness. Karen didn't want that. She knew she had to keep her mouth shut. But it seemed Madara was willing to keep Sasuke under his control. As soon as those thoughts hit her home, Karen realized that she needed to set Taka free as soon as possible if they want to live.